If you are taking the TOEFL test soon and are currently preparing for it, here is what you need to know. My name is Anastasia. I scored 119 out of 120 on the TOEFL test, and I have been teaching TOEFL for over 10 years. I've also developed 2 TOEFL preparation platforms where I created tasks from scratch even before AI became part of our lives. So I know exactly how the test is organized. In today's video, I want to share all the information you need to get the score you want in the shortest time possible. We'll go through each section of the test step by step, discuss useful tips and strategies, and complete full practice tasks so that you feel as confident as possible on test day. For high-scoring templates for the writing and speaking sections, click the link below. You'll also get free access to our practice platform. Let's begin. First, we'll cover the most important tips, and then we'll do a full reading section, focusing on each task in detail. I'm going to share 8 essential tips to help you boost your reading score. Let's get started. Tip number 1, improve your reading speed. One of the most important skills for the TOEFL reading section is the ability to read quickly while still understanding the content. You don't have time to read each text in detail, so you should focus on improving your reading speed without losing comprehension. You can take a free speed reading test on the Outread website. Simply click the Start button, read the text, and then click Done Reading. You will then be asked to answer some comprehension questions about the passage. When you finish, you'll see your reading speed and comprehension rate. To improve your reading speed, you can also use the Read Speeder website, which offers a free speed reading course. It provides short, targeted exercises that can help you increase your reading speed. In addition, reading a lot naturally builds speed. For example, if you need to read hundreds of pages for university assignments or work, your reading speed will improve quickly. I know many students who have developed strong reading speed simply by devouring their favorite books every day. Tip number 2 is attempt every question. Don't skip questions without at least trying to answer them. Even if you are unsure, try to eliminate incorrect options and make an educated guess. The TOEFL does not penalize incorrect answers, so there is no disadvantage in guessing. It's harder to guess in the Complete the Words task, but all the other tasks have 4 options to choose from. You should also keep in mind that TOEFL questions are presented in a specific order, which makes it easier to locate answers in the text. Here is a useful strategy I often teach my students. If you have 2 questions about the same passage, notice, or email, the first question usually refers to the earlier part of the text, while the second question refers to the second part. Therefore, knowing which part of the text you use to answer one question helps you identify where to look for the next answer. For example, in the Read an Academic Passage task, if you are asked 5 questions, the first question is typically about the main idea of the text. Question 2 will most likely focus on the first paragraph, and question 3 usually relates to the second paragraph. Questions 4 and 5 often refer to the final paragraph. In addition, information from earlier questions can help you answer later ones. For instance, once you answer the main idea question, which is the first question in both the Read in Daily Life and Read an Academic Passage tasks, you already understand the overall structure of the text. This makes it easier to locate answers to the more specific detailed questions that follow. Tip number 3 is watch out for extreme or absolute words. Extreme or absolute words such as only, always, never, none, nobody, or all can be red flags in answer choices. These words make a statement very rigid, and in many cases, options that contain them are incorrect. So whenever you see such words, be cautious. They may not match the more nuanced information in the passage. For example, consider this negative factual information question. One of the answer choices contains the word only, which is an extreme word, and immediately makes you suspect that it might be the correct answer. Remember that for this type of question, you must select the option that is not mentioned in the text. Since I know that answer choices with extreme words are often incorrect based on the passage, I'm about 90% certain that this is the correct option. Let's double check it. How should we approach this question? A student with limited TOEFL reading experience might begin by reading the entire passage first, or might panic and move back and forth between the text and the answer choices. You can pause the video now and try to answer this question yourself. In fact, the most effective strategy for negative factual information questions is to read the answer choices first. As you read them, identify the keywords, the words that will help you locate the relevant part of the text. Then, using those keywords, read only the necessary sections of the passage. As you read, eliminate the options that are clearly mentioned until you identify the one that is not. As you can see, all the other options except B are stated in the text, which is why B is the correct answer. And my initial guess was right. The text says that different types of workers moved to industrial cities. It does not state that cities only attracted workers with specialized technical training. Because this statement is not supported by the passage, option B is the correct answer. So paying attention to extreme words and using the right strategies can save you a lot of time on test day. Tip number 4 is learn synonyms and paraphrases. As you just saw in the task we did, the TOEFL test often uses synonyms and paraphrases in questions and answer choices to assess your understanding of vocabulary and ideas. For example, if a passage uses the verb increase, an answer choice might use the phrase go up. In addition to synonyms, the TOEFL frequently relies on paraphrasing. While synonyms replace individual words, paraphrases restate entire ideas or sentences using different language. My advice is to develop the habit of recognizing multiple ways to express the same idea. This will help you understand the meaning even when different wording is used. 2 effective exercises to build the skill are: 1. Create synonym chains. For example, take the verb increase. Possible synonyms include go up, rise, expand, boost, grow, escalate, surge, enhance, amplify, heighten, elevate, augment, intensify, skyrocket, and others. Not all of these are exact synonyms. For instance, skyrocket means to increase very rapidly. However, for TOEFL reading purposes, it functions as a sufficiently close synonym. 2. Practice paraphrasing academic texts. Take short excerpts from academic passages and rewrite them in your own words using synonyms and structural changes. For example, you can change word forms. Include, including. Change word order. Switch between active and passive voice. This is an excellent daily exercise. If you practice for even 3 to 4 minutes a day, paraphrasing on the TOEFL will quickly become much easier. This is an activity I regularly do with my one-on-one students, and most of them struggle at first because they're not used to generating synonyms quickly. However, after a few days, they become more confident, and after a few weeks, they can paraphrase academic texts almost instantly. This is exactly the skill you need, not only for reading, but also for speaking and writing sections. In my TOEFL course, I have specifically dedicated the first few lessons to these types of exercises, so the students preparing for the test are fully ready in terms of both strategy and vocabulary. If you would like to expand your vocabulary and learn high-scoring templates for the writing and speaking sections, feel free to check the link below. And a quick reminder, if you choose the Pro package, please schedule your consultation at least 1 week before your test date. Since I provide detailed corrections and additional feedback on your writing and speaking, I want to make sure you have enough time to absorb and apply the suggestions. Now, let's move on to tip 5. Extract important information and skip extra details. For main idea questions, which you often see in the new TOEFL reading format, it's important to focus on the key information and avoid getting distracted by unnecessary details. For example, information placed in commas or parentheses is often supplementary rather than essential to the main idea. In addition, you should frequently ignore difficult or unfamiliar words and instead focus on the core meaning of the paragraph, notice, or email. Train yourself to quickly identify what is important in the text, especially when you need to draw conclusions from the information provided. A very effective exercise is to read for about 5 minutes every day. As you read, pause after each paragraph and summarize it in one sentence. Then, after finishing each page, summarize the overall information in 3 to 5 sentences. Make sure you focus only on the main idea and ignore unfamiliar vocabulary. You can learn those words later while working specifically on synonyms and paraphrasing skills. If you practice this way, you will learn to quickly grasp the gist of any message. The skill is also very useful for the Take an Interview task in the speaking section of the TOEFL. In that task, you will listen to a question and respond in 45 seconds. You do not see the question on the screen, so you need to identify the main idea immediately and begin speaking without preparation. Tip number 6 is understand signal words. Signal words such as however, in contrast, for example, and therefore show the relationship between ideas in a text. These words act as guides that help you follow the author's reasoning and organizational structure. Paying attention to these signals makes it easier to understand how the text develops and to answer questions about the structure and the purpose of different parts of the passage. Signal words are especially helpful for rhetorical purpose questions, where you need to understand why the author included a particular sentence or idea. Read the questions carefully. This may sound basic, but it's essential to read each question carefully and simplify it in your own words. The TOEFL reading section includes a variety of question types, and most of them require you to clearly understand what you're looking for in the text. For example, in factual information questions, read the question closely and restate it more simply. Consider this example. According to the text, which of the following contributed to the decline of the global economy? In simpler terms, you're looking for the reason why the global economy declined. For negative factual information questions, always remember that you must select the statement that is not true according to the passage. Many students become excited when they find an option mentioned in the text and choose it as the answer, which is incorrect. Understanding exactly what the question is asking will prevent you from wasting time on unnecessary details or misinterpreting the task. Tip number 8 is always eliminate 2 incorrect options first. Even if a question seems challenging, start by crossing out 2 options that are clearly wrong. The TOEFL can be tricky, but in most cases there are 2 options that are definitely incorrect. Once you eliminate them, you're choosing between the remaining 2 options, which significantly increases your chances of selecting the correct answer. Also, be cautious if the option you're planning to choose contains too many keywords taken directly from the text. Remember, your task is to recognize paraphrases. So whenever you see an option that repeats many of the same words from the passage, think twice before selecting it. By following these tips, you'll build stronger reading strategies and be better prepared for the TOEFL reading section. As you've seen, it all comes down to practice, consistency, and learning how to manage your time effectively during the test. What will the TOEFL reading format look like in 2026? Let's find out together. Today we're going to focus on the reading section, and more specifically on task 1. I'll first explain how this task works, and then we'll practice it together. So let's get started. The first task in the new TOEFL reading section is called Complete the Words. In this task, you're given a short academic text. Within the text, there are 10 words that are not written in full, The second half of each word has been removed. Your job is to complete each word by typing in the missing letters. It sounds quite straightforward, doesn't it? Let's try it out and take a look at the first text. Just a quick heads up, for this task, I've chosen texts from different subject areas, so you can test and strengthen your academic and scientific vocabulary. Today, we'll start with two texts, both related to biology. Fossil records provide important evidence about the history of life on Earth. I'll give you 1 minute to complete this task on your own, and then we'll go through the correct answers together. Okay, let's go through the text together. Fossil records provide important evidence about the history of life on Earth by studying fossils. The correct answer is studying. What's important to realize is that this exercise is testing your vocabulary and your grammar skills at the same time. In this sentence, we have to answer with studying because there is a preposition by before it. In English, prepositions, short words like by, in, for, on, and so on, are often followed by gerunds, which are the ing forms of verbs. So, whenever you see a preposition in the text and a verb following it, the verb has to be in the ing form. By the way, if you're planning to take the new TOEFL 2026 test, make sure you subscribe to the channel. I'll be releasing a full series of videos where we break down every task in the new format, step by step, so you stay ahead of the changes and feel fully prepared. Let's move on. By studying fossils found in different rock layers. So, what is found in this sentence? It's a past participle. Simply put, this is the third form of a verb. For example, find, found, found. The last found is the past participle. Or take another verb, go, went, gone. Gone is the past participle here. We often use past participles to form perfect tenses or the passive voice. For example, she has gone. I was found. But what is the role of found in our sentence? It is different. Here, found is used as an adjective. Fossils found in different rock layers. The word found describes the noun fossils, so it functions as an adjective. In fact, the phrase fossils found in different rock layers is a shortened version of fossils that are found in different rock layers. So found is a shortened form of that are found. This structure is called a reduced relative clause. Let's quickly revise. Found is a past participle. Past participles have three main purposes. They help form perfect tenses. I've been to the Maldives. The passive voice. The bank was robbed. Or they're used to describe nouns. A painting stolen from the museum was found. As for the word layers, if it's unfamiliar, think of a sandwich. First comes the bun, then the beef, then cheese, then tomatoes, then pickles, and so on. Each part is a layer. Lasagna is another good example. It's cooked in layers as well. First, you add a layer of pasta sheets, then sauce, then cheese. Then you repeat the process. Again, grammar is very important here. One of my students thought the correct answer was layout. She felt that it fit. Obviously, the word doesn't work lexically, but her vocabulary wasn't strong enough to notice that. In a situation like this, she could have relied on grammar instead. There is no way the word layout fits grammatically. Let's take a closer look. Layout is a countable noun, so it needs an article. We would have to say a different rock layout. However, in the original sentence, there is no article. That tells us that the word after rock must be either uncountable or plural. I could say different rock layouts, but layouts would be too long to fit in the gap, so it's clearly the wrong answer. Let's go back to the text. By studying fossils found in different rock layers, scientists can understand how organisms evolved over time. The answers can and how are quite obvious. Evolved is harder to guess. For those of you who don't know this word, it means to change or develop gradually, step by step. Think of evolution. This is a slow process of change and development in our world. So to evolve means that something changes or develops not quickly, not in a day or two, but over a long period of time. As for the answer time, over time is a very common expression. It means gradually, during a long period of time. Let's keep reading. Fossil records show when certain species appeared and when they became extinct. To explain what fossil records are, it's important to start with fossils themselves. Fossils are what is left of plants and animals that lived a very long time ago. They look like this. Fossil records, then, include all the fossils that have been found, together with the rock layers they are found in. Scientists use fossil records to understand the history of life on Earth. Finally, even though the last missing word in this sentence is quite easy, some people still make mistakes and write what instead of when. Let's quickly look at why what is the wrong answer. Let's imagine we choose what instead of when. Fossil records show what certain species appeared. This is incorrect because what has no grammatical role here. The word what is used to introduce unknown information. For example, if I remove the word certain, I can say fossil records show what species appeared. In this sentence, we don't know which species appeared, so the information is unknown. Here, what acts as a determiner. It modifies the word species, and the clause answers the question which species. In other words, it means fossil records show which exact species appeared. This sentence is grammatically correct, even though it has a different meaning. However, when the word certain comes before species, certain is already a determiner. In English, a noun usually takes only one central determiner, so we cannot use what together with certain. So you can't say what certain species. My book. What and certain are both trying to do the same determiner job, so they clash. The noun phrase, certain species, is already complete. Because of this, there is nothing for what to refer to. All right, we've finished the first complete the words task. Let's move on to the second one. I'll now give you 1 minute to complete this task on your own. Now let's check your answers. Evolution explains how species adapt to their environments over long periods of time. One important concept is convergent evolution, which occurs when unrelated species develop similar traits. This usually happens because the species live in comparable environments and face similar challenges. Although the text itself may seem a bit challenging, the words with the missing halves are actually quite easy. The only ones that might cause difficulty are evolution, to occur, unrelated, traits, and species. We've already discussed evolution, which means a slow change or development of something over time. To occur simply means to happen. Unrelated means not related or not connected. Traits are characteristics or features. Finally, the word species refers to a group of animals or plants with similar characteristics. For example, dogs are one species, cats are another. All humans belong to the same species. Lions and tigers may look similar, but they're different species. Simply put, you can think of a species as one kind of animal or plant. One important grammar note: species is the same in both the singular and the plural. We say one species and many species. As you know, Read and Daily Life tasks consist of shorter texts with 2 questions and slightly longer texts with 3. Today, we'll focus on the shorter texts, but in the future, I'll also film lessons on the longer texts. Subscribe to the channel so you won't miss them. The first question always asks about the main idea of the text, while the second question usually asks about details. For main idea questions, I suggest reading the question first, then quickly look through the text, formulate your own answer, and look at the options. Choose the one that matches your response. This is extremely important because it gives you extra confirmation that you did well and didn't fall for the traps the TOEFL test has set. Also, avoid options containing too many keywords from the text or extreme words such as only, never, fully, and completely, as they're usually traps. Knowing these tips will save you time on test day. Now, let's look at the task. You will have 20 seconds to answer, and then you will hear my explanation. The correct answer is B, to announce a temporary suspension of water service and provide related guidance. It's not A, because this option contains the extreme word only. Even if the main purpose of the notice were to outline procedures, residents must follow to prevent appliance damage. Procedures and only procedures are not the same. The word only makes the statement too narrow and therefore inaccurate. This is why you need to be very careful with extreme or absolute words. They may present you with an otherwise plausible sentence and then include a single modifier that changes the entire meaning. Compare these sentences. Students have problems with articles. All students have problems with articles. Students only have problems with articles. Even though they look similar, they express completely different meanings. When I simply say students, I usually mean most of them, but not necessarily all. If I say only have problems, I mean they have no other difficulties at all. So whenever you see a word like all or only, pay close attention because such options are very often incorrect. Now, the email states that the Municipal Water Authority will carry out maintenance on the supply line serving the residential complex, and consequently, water service will be unavailable. And it then provides guidance on what residents should do. For example, It instructs them to ensure that all taps and water-dependent appliances remain shut off. This is why B is the correct answer. Let's look at some useful vocabulary. Residents are people who live in a place, usually for a long period of time. For example, if you live in an apartment building in Boston and that is your home, you are a resident of that building. The email begins with "Dear Residents," which means that it is addressed to the people who live in the residential complex. Maintenance is the work done to fix or improve something, so it keeps working well. Roads need maintenance, machines need maintenance, buildings need maintenance, and water systems need maintenance. In our email, workers will come to check the water system, repair or replace parts, and make sure the pipes function properly. If maintenance is scheduled, it means the repair or service work has been planned in advance. Simply put, the water authority has already set a time to work on the main pipe, so the water will be off during that period. Consequently, as a result, a tap, the device you turn to control water from a pipe. You can say, "Turn off the tap." The kitchen tap is leaking. In American English, people usually say faucet. However, in building or utility notices, like this one, the word tap is very common. Let's move on to question 2. Again, take 20 seconds to try it on your own first. The correct answer is A. This was a specific detail question, so you needed to locate the relevant part of the text and read it carefully. The question asks, according to the notice, what precaution are residents advised to take? A precaution is something you do in advance to prevent a problem or danger. In the notice, the precaution is storing water before the interruption. So residents will not have difficulties during the shutdown, which is why A, secure a reserve of water prior to the scheduled shutdown, is correct. This information can be found in the second paragraph. It says, residents are asked to ensure that all taps and water-dependent appliances remain shut off throughout the shutdown period, and to set aside an adequate quantity of water beforehand for essential domestic use. So, there are 2 precautions mentioned. 1, ensuring that all taps and water-dependent appliances remain shut off. And 2, setting aside an adequate quantity of water beforehand for essential domestic use. Great job! Let's do another short Read in Daily Life task. This time, we'll read a notice. As we just discussed, the first question is the main idea question. It asks about the main purpose of the apartment lease notice. For those of you who don't know, a lease is a legal agreement to rent a home, apartment, or other property for a fixed period of time. It's a common term in the US, and you'll see it often. The text says that lease renewal offers are distributed electronically. If you fail to respond within 14 days of receiving the offer, they will assume that you don't want to renew, and the apartment will be shown to other prospective tenants. If you want to request any changes, you must do so in writing before the renewal deadline. Oral agreements must be confirmed in the final lease document. In short, they're discussing lease renewals and the different rules residents should be aware of, which is why C, to clarify the procedures and deadlines related to lease renewal, is the correct response. Remember, your job is to identify the main idea, which is the idea repeated throughout the text. Now, let's take a look at the second question. Again, you will have 20 seconds to respond on your own. Which of the following actions would ensure that a tenant's request is formally considered by management? The good news is that with this type of task, answering the second question is usually much easier. At this point, you already understand the text well and know where to look for the answer. As I always remind my students, the questions usually follow the order of the text. So while the first question often focuses on the text as a whole, the second question is very likely to target the second part of the short text. This is what we used to call a factual information question in the old version of the test. The strategy is simple. You identify the keywords in the question. Locate the relevant part of the text. Read that sentence carefully. Form your own answer and then choose the option that best matches it. In our case, the keywords are tenant, request, formally considered, and management. The most important word here is clearly management. That is the word I focus on when I scan the text. I then find the sentence that says, requests for altered lease terms, including rent adjustments or changes in occupancy, must be submitted in writing before the renewal deadline and are subject to approval at the sole discretion of management. If I ignore unnecessary details and some difficult vocabulary, the core meaning becomes very clear. Requests must be submitted in writing. They must be sent before the deadline, and management makes the final decision. So the correct answer is B. Submitting a written request for modified lease terms before the stated renewal deadline. That's it. As you can see, the task itself is not difficult, as long as you ignore unfamiliar words and apply the right strategy. And speaking of unfamiliar words, let's take a look at some useful vocabulary from this text. These are the words you should write down if you don't know them. Lease, lease renewal offers, prior to, lease term, failure to respond, unit, prospective, tenants, altered lease terms, changes in occupancy, are subject to approval at the sole discretion of management, binding, explicitly. Let's start with the word lease. We've already discussed it, so you know that a lease is a written agreement between a tenant and a landlord. It usually explains how long you can live in the apartment and what rules you must follow. When you rent an apartment in Los Angeles, for example, you usually sign a 1-year lease. Now, lease renewal offers. These are messages that ask tenants if they want to continue living in the apartment after their lease ends. For example, your landlord may send you an email saying, "Your lease ends soon. Would you like to renew for another year?" In our text, lease renewal offers are sent electronically to ask residents if they want to stay. Next is prior to. Prior to simply means before. For example, you might get a reminder email a week prior to a doctor's appointment. According to the text, the offers are sent 60 days before the lease expires. Now, let's look at the phrase lease term. The lease term is the length of time the lease lasts. If your lease starts in January and ends in December, the lease term is 1 year. Next is the phrase failure to respond. It's a formal way to say that someone does not respond. Simply put, it means not replying or not answering at all. For example, if your landlord emails you and you never reply, this is a failure to respond. You will often see the structure failure to plus verb in formal contexts. It means not doing something that you're expected or required to do, especially in instructions or notices. In simple terms, it's a formal way to say if you don't do this. For example, failure to pay rent may result in eviction. If you don't pay rent, you may be evicted. Failure to follow instructions can cause errors. If you don't follow instructions, mistakes can happen. Failure to submit the form will delay your application. If If you don't submit the form, your application will be delayed. Failure to appear in court may lead to a fine. If you don't come to court, you may be fined. Let's look at a few other common words you'll encounter often when living in the US. A unit is one apartment inside a building. For example, apartment 3B in a large building is one unit. Prospective means possible or future. For example, a prospective student is someone who may attend a university in the future. In our text, the phrase prospective tenants describes people who might rent the apartment later. Now, tenants are people who rent and live in a property they do not own. If you rent an apartment in Seattle, you're a tenant. Altered lease terms. Changes to the original lease agreement. Asking for lower rent or a shorter lease would mean altering the lease terms. The notice states that residents may request changes, but those changes must be reviewed. Changes in occupancy. Changes in who lives in the apartment. Adding a roommate or having someone move out is a change in occupancy. The notice states that residents must request approval if the number of people living in the unit changes. Now, the phrase "are subject to approval" means the request must be reviewed and accepted before it becomes valid. For example, your manager must approve your vacation request before you book the flight. The phrase "at the sole discretion of management" means that management alone makes the final decision. No one else decides. Simply put, management has full control over whether requests are accepted or rejected. If a landlord can decide whether or not to allow a pet, that decision is at the sole discretion of the landlord. Explicitly means clearly and directly stated, with no confusion. If a rule is written clearly in a contract, it's explicit. Agreements must be clearly written in the final lease document. Now, if we connect everything to the full text, we get the following meaning. The notice explains that residents receive renewal offers 60 days before their lease ends. If they do not respond within 14 days, management assumes they do not want to renew and may advertise the unit to new tenants. Any requests to change lease terms or occupancy must be made in writing and approved by management. Verbal promises do not count unless they're clearly written in the final lease. That's it. Now, let's wrap up this video with a short quiz to check how well you remember everything. I'll ask you a few questions and you should give quick responses. 1. Which task is the Read in Daily Life task on test day? First, second, or third? Second, the Read in Daily Life task is the second task in the new reading section. It comes after the Complete the Words task and before the academic reading passage. 2. How many questions does the short Read in Daily Life task have? 2 questions. Short Read in Daily Life tasks are followed by 2 questions, while long Read in Daily Life tasks are followed by 3. 3. Which question usually comes first? The main idea question. 4. Which question usually comes second? The specific detail question. 5. Which words should you be careful about? Extreme words, such as only, never, completely, fully. They often change the meaning of a sentence, and options containing them are frequently incorrect. The Read an Academic Passage task is undoubtedly the most difficult part of the new TOEFL reading section. It's a shorter version of the old test format, and although many students expect it to be much easier than it used to be, that's not always the case. Many of the texts my students saw on test day were really challenging, and many of them covered academic topics that were also common in the old format. In fact, if you're not familiar with the vocabulary related to biology, zoology, art, physics, astronomy, and other subjects, make sure to watch these videos because you will definitely need those words on test day. The kinds of topics you might see on the test include sea turtle hatching strategies for navigation, bird colonies, cave and rock art, bioluminescence in marine creatures, early theories of continental drift, Alaska and bark beetles, and others. Besides that, timing is also a real struggle. You'll have about 36 seconds to answer each question, which is much less time than you had in the old format. As a result, to ace this part of the test, you should be ready to read and understand difficult texts, know the types of questions extremely well, know the strategies for each question and how to adapt them based on the situation. Be ready to read almost the entire text to answer the questions. Be good at working under a strict time limit. Based on my students' experience taking the test, you may get a few simple academic passages and a few very difficult ones, or only difficult ones. So in case you get only the difficult passages, make sure you're well prepared. In this video, we'll focus on this type of TOEFL reading task and go through it together so you know exactly how to approach it. For those of you who are new to the channel, I'm Anastasia. I help students prepare for the TOEFL exam and get the scores they need in the shortest and easiest way possible, through both one-on-one and recorded lessons. Through my individual sessions, I become familiar with common TOEFL concerns and questions, such as which question types students find difficult, why some strategies work and others don't, and what you should do differently to earn a higher score. I share these insights with you on this channel. Very often, just a few small changes can dramatically improve your score. Without further ado, let's jump into the read an academic passage task. Today, we'll work with the text about earthquake prediction. Each academic passage is about 200 words long and is followed by 5 questions. The first question is always the main idea question, and it's followed by other question types, such as factual information, negative factual information, rhetorical purpose, inference, and others. Let's start working through the questions one by one. What is the passage mainly about? To answer this question, you need to skim the text. For those of you who may not know, there are several reading skills: skimming, scanning, and close reading. Skimming means moving quickly through a paragraph or a passage without reading every word in order to get the main idea or the overall structure of the text. This is something we often do when we read news articles online, and it's the skill you need for main idea questions. Scanning means looking through the text to find the specific part you need to read. This is especially important for factual information and negative factual information questions. To answer these questions, you should first identify the keywords in the question, then locate the part of the text where those words or ideas appear. However, once you find the right place in the text, you need close reading. This skill is crucial because without it, it's very difficult to answer most questions correctly. Many students forget this and rely only on skimming and scanning, which often leads to lower scores. In close reading, you read a sentence or a short part of the passage carefully and try to understand it in detail. You break it down into a few main ideas, simplify them, and focus on the meaning. This helps you identify the correct answer, and it's not always easy to do when your time is limited. So, if you have been wondering how to improve your reading score, it's best to focus on improving both your reading speed and your ability to do close reading under time pressure. For our main idea question, we need skimming. So let's quickly go through the text. You now have 36 seconds to do it yourself. Then keep watching to check your answer. The text has 3 paragraphs. The first paragraph says that there are 2 types of earthquake prediction and introduces the first one, long-term forecasting. Then the author explains how it works. The text says, in which the probability is calculated by, and by plotting the number of earthquakes, diagrams can be constructed. This clearly looks like a description of how long-term forecasting is done, so I don't read every single word. Instead, I focus on the general idea. The rest of the paragraph continues to explain this method of prediction. For example, it says, predictions can then be made if the date of the last earthquake is known. So the main idea of the first paragraph is the explanation of long-term forecasting. The second paragraph focuses on short-term forecasting and again provides a description of the process. How do I know this? Because I see the phrase which involves, which signals that the text will explain how this process works. The paragraph also introduces terms like the dilatancy model and microcracks. Finally, the third paragraph goes into more detail about microcracks. It explains that groundwater flows into the highly stressed areas during the formation of microcracks. Then the text says that these changes affect the ability of the rock to do certain things. This is followed by several detailed academic explanations that we don't need to analyze right now. At the end, the paragraph gives an example of an area of recent uplift along the San Andreas Fault near Los Angeles called the Palmdale Bulge, which is being carefully monitored as a possible indicator of a future earthquake. So, in a way, the third paragraph continues the idea introduced in the second paragraph. This means that the correct answer is C, scientific approaches to earthquake prediction. The passage describes 2 approaches, long-term forecasting and short-term forecasting, and explains how each of them works. What you should be careful about in this question is not choosing options that contain too many keywords from the text. These are usually traps. The TOEFL test makers often design answers like this to attract your attention, so you need to be attentive. For example, I would immediately eliminate D because it contains the name San Andreas Fault, which appears only as a specific example in the passage. Also, notice that to answer this question correctly, you need to ignore many of the details and unfamiliar words and instead focus on the structure of the text. Phrases such as which involves, in which, by doing something, and similar expressions help you see the direction of the explanation. They usually signal that the author is describing a process or a method. However, the other questions won't always be this easy. Many of them will require you to understand the subject-specific vocabulary in the passage. If you're not familiar with words like forecasting, seismic gaps, records, fault, magnitudes, occurrence, and others, it can be much harder to answer the questions correctly. I will be posting more lessons to help you expand your vocabulary, so don't forget to subscribe to the channel not to miss them. Now, time for question 2. According to paragraph 2, all of the following information is used in the process of long-term earthquake prediction, except. In this question, we need to find the option that is not mentioned in the text. Sometimes the correct answer is something that is not stated at all, while other times it's something that is contradicted by the text. So be careful with that. Many students assume that the correct answer is always simply missing from the passage, and they immediately eliminate any option that contains keywords from the paragraph. That is the wrong approach. Instead, you should check each option carefully and eliminate the ones that are clearly supported by the text. Only after doing that will you be able to identify the correct answer. First, take 36 seconds to answer this question on your own. Okay, now let's check the answer together. We'll start by analyzing the keywords in each of the 4 options. The keywords in the options are seismic gaps, records, past earthquakes, fault area, date, last recorded earthquake, earthquake activity, other fault segments. Remember that after the main idea question, the answers to the remaining questions usually appear in order in the passage. We also see that the question asks about long-term forecasting, so the first paragraph is the part we should focus on. As I read, I can eliminate the options one by one. The text says, the probability of an earthquake along a particular segment of a fault within a certain time interval is calculated by studying seismic gaps and historical records of earthquakes that have occurred along the fault segment. This means that A and B are clearly mentioned in the text. Then, there is a longer section discussing magnitudes and the recurrence interval, which we can skip. After that, we reach the final sentence. Predictions can then be made that an earthquake of that magnitude has a high probability of occurrence within a specified time interval if the date of the last earthquake is known. This shows that C is also mentioned. Since A, B, and C all appear in the text, the correct answer must be D, which is not mentioned in the paragraph. Great job! Question 3. According to the passage, long-term forecasting can be used to predict which of the following. The question is again about long-term forecasting, so you'll need to use the same first paragraph to answer it. In the past, questions like this would usually begin with according to paragraph 1 or according to paragraph 2, which immediately told you where to look. Now, however, you may see questions that say according to the passage, or simply long-term forecasting can be used to predict which of the following. This makes it harder to locate the correct part of the text. In this passage, the structure is very clear. So, you can quickly see that the relevant information is in paragraph 1. However, it won't always be that obvious. In some passages, you will need to search for keywords to find the correct section to read. Another important point is that the texts have become shorter, so you need to engage with them more actively. In this case, we'll look at the parts of the first paragraph that we haven't analyzed yet. This means we'll need to read almost the entire first paragraph carefully to answer questions 2 and 3. In the past, passages were longer, but there were also large sections you didn't really have to read. Now the texts are shorter, and you'll most likely have to read almost every sentence in the passage. Try to answer this question on your own first. I see that the question asks what long-term forecasting predicts. This information is quite general, so I'll most likely find it at the beginning of the paragraph. I see the sentence. The first type is long-term forecasting, in which the probability of an earthquake along a particular segment of a fault within a certain time interval is calculated by ... So, what are scientists trying to do with long-term forecasting? They're trying to predict the probability of an earthquake, where? Along a particular segment of a fault, and when? Within a certain time interval. In other words, long-term forecasting predicts whether an earthquake is likely to occur along a specific fault segment during a certain period of time. By the way, a fault looks like this. It's a crack or fracture in the Earth's crust that forms when accumulated energy is released. When the tectonic plates that make up the Earth's surface move, they can slide past each other or collide, which creates a fault. When the accumulated tension in the fault is suddenly released, an earthquake occurs. As you can see, the word fault appears very often in texts related to earthquakes. The key phrase is within a certain time interval. This tells us that long-term forecasting is about when an earthquake may occur, not about its exact magnitude or about interactions between fault segments. Usually, one sentence is enough to find the correct answer, but you can also see the same idea repeated in the last sentence of the paragraph. Predictions can then be made that an earthquake of that magnitude has a high probability of occurrence within a specified time interval if the date of the last earthquake is known. This means that C, the possible date of the next earthquake, is the correct answer. Again, be careful not to choose options that contain very obvious keywords from the text. For example, option D repeats words that appear in the passage, but it doesn't express the correct idea. The correct answer is usually paraphrased, so you need to understand the meaning of the sentence, not just match words. As a result, answering this question requires a combination of scanning to find the right place in the text and close reading to understand the meaning. Question 4 is another factual information question. It asks, according to the dilatancy model, what happens to rocks shortly before an earthquake? The keyword here is dilatancy model, so you should locate the phrase in the text. Read that part carefully and try to formulate the answer yourself first. You have 36 seconds to do that. The question asks, what happens to rocks shortly before an earthquake? The word before is very important because sometimes the passage can trick you by giving information about what happened after an earthquake. Instead, I can find the relevant section in the second paragraph. It says, research leading to short-term forecasting, which involves a shorter time interval, has been focused on precursors observed prior to previous earthquakes. Many of these precursors can be explained by a theory called the dilatancy model. Under this hypothesis, rocks in the process of strain along a fault show significant dilation or swelling before rupture. The phrase prior to, which means before, and the phrase dilatancy model helps me locate the right part of the text. I can see that rocks in the process of strain along a fault show significant dilation or swelling before rupture. This means that B, they show signs of expanding, is the correct answer. To dilate means to make or become wider, larger, or more open. We often use this verb to describe eyes. For example, her eyes dilated with horror. To swell means to become larger or rounder in size, so both dilate and swell are synonyms for expand. Some other synonyms include widen, enlarge, and inflate. This is where knowing synonyms becomes very helpful. As you can see, the answer to the questions usually appear one after another in the text. You also need to work closely with the passage because the texts have become shorter and you have about 36 seconds per question. That means you really need to develop and practice an effective strategy. If you struggled with this text, either because of vocabulary or grammar, click the link below and become part of our TOEFL community. This is exactly what we focus on there. We go through the different question types, Discuss the strategies and analyze full reading sections together so that you learn not only the strategies, but also how to apply them quickly on test day without wasting time. You will also get access to an online platform that simulates the TOEFL test and allows you to practice each task separately. For example, if you struggle with the read an academic passage task, you can first watch the lesson dedicated to this part of the test and then start practicing. You can complete as many exercises as you need to improve and then move on to the next section. You'll also learn templates for high-scoring answers in the speaking and writing sections, important vocabulary for the listening section, as well as guides on sentence structure and punctuation, lists of prepositions, emails, and writing for an academic discussion checklists, and much more. If you still need help or want your writing and speaking evaluated, you can choose the Pro package and schedule a personal consultation with me. I'll show you exactly what you are doing wrong and what you should do differently to achieve a higher score. Very often, just a few small changes can significantly improve your results. The link to the course is below. If you need help with your TOEFL preparation, click on it and become part of our TOEFL community. Finally, question 5 is a rhetorical purpose question. It asks, the author discusses the San Andreas Fault near Los Angeles in order to. Try to answer it on your own first. The correct answer is B. Give an example of an area where underground earthquake activity is apparent from land changes above the ground. Why is B correct? Look at these two sentences. Localized changes in land surface elevation are also related to volume changes at depth. An area of recent uplift along the San Andreas Fault near Los Angeles, which has been named the Palmdale Bulge, is being monitored. The first sentence introduces the general idea. Changes on the surface can reflect changes deep underground. The next sentence gives a specific example of that idea. The Palmdale Bulge near the San Andreas Fault. So, the author mentions this location to illustrate the connection between underground activity and changes in the land surface. This is a very typical example of a rhetorical purpose question. If the information you are asked about is more specific, read the sentence before it to find the reason the author included it. If the information is more general, read the sentence after it to see how the author develops the idea. And here's a bonus vocabulary question. On test day, you will have only 5 questions, but I decided to add one more to test your vocabulary. The question is, the word rupture in the passage is closest in meaning to pressure, break, movement, weakness. The correct answer is B, break. The word rupture means a sudden break or tear. In simple terms, it describes a situation when something breaks apart suddenly because of pressure or stress. We often see this word in connection with earthquakes. For example, when pressure builds up inside the earth, the rocks along a fault break suddenly. This breaking is called a rupture, and it causes an earthquake. You might also see a sentence like this. The earthquake happened when the rock ruptured along the fault. We'll start with a full TOEFL listening practice test. So you can measure your current level and see how many questions you can answer correctly under realistic test conditions. But that's only the first part. After the test, we're going to focus on what many students consider the most challenging part of the TOEFL listening, academic lectures. And here's the interesting thing. Most students assume that listening problems come from vocabulary or speed. In reality, many strong English speakers lose points for completely different reasons, and those reasons are often not directly connected to their listening skills. So, after the practice test, I'll walk you through everything you need to know about the Listen to an Academic Talk task. We'll also complete 2 academic lectures with questions so you can practice approaching this task more strategically. We'll analyze the questions, discuss common traps, and look at the listening habits that separate higher scoring students from everyone else. So make sure you watch this video until the very end. Take the test seriously. Don't pause the video. Don't look up the answers. Treat it like the real exam. Let's begin. Task 1. Listen and choose a response. In this task, you will hear 8 questions or statements, and you need to choose the most appropriate response to each one. I'll give you 5 seconds to answer on your own, and then I'll tell you the correct answer. We'll do this after each question because I believe this is the most effective way to practice. Alright, let's begin. I was under the impression the seminar started later. The correct answer is B. The speaker said, I was under the impression the seminar started later. In other words, she thought the seminar would start later than it actually did. That means it must have started earlier, so the correct response is B. It was moved up by an hour. This is a fairly tricky question, and by the way, my biggest tip for this type of task is to focus on the overall meaning, not individual words. If you choose answers simply because they repeat words from the statement, you'll most likely choose the wrong option. For example, you might hear the word later in the statement and then pick answer D. But that would be incorrect. Yes, the word later appears there, but the meaning of that response has nothing to do with the speaker's situation. In contrast, if you understood that the speaker is talking about a misunderstanding about timing, you would easily choose B, since it's the only option that explains why the seminar started earlier. Alright, let's move on. I'm not sure this form is filled out correctly. The correct answer is C. This one is quite straightforward. I'm not sure this form is filled out correctly simply means I'm not sure this form is completed correctly. So the most natural response is to offer to check it. Let me take a look at it. Aren't you presenting your project today? The correct answer is D. Aren't you presenting your project today? Is a typical negative yes-no question. The speaker expects that the presentation is happening today, so the most appropriate response is to confirm or correct that expectation. The sentence, no, it was rescheduled, directly addresses the timing, which makes it the best answer. I didn't realize the assignment required citations. The correct answer is D. They are listed in the guidelines. Again, notice that the answers repeating words from the statement are incorrect. Answer A repeats assignment. Answer B uses cited, which is related to citations, and answer C repeats citation. The correct response, however, does not repeat any of those words. So someone who relies only on keywords might eliminate it, even though it's actually the best answer. By the way, guidelines are the instructions or requirements for a task. Citations are references to sources, usually written in a specific academic format. And assignment is a very common word that simply means a task a student has to complete. I don't think I'll finish the report in time. The correct answer is B. You can request an extension. An extension means extra time to finish something you're working on, such as a report, project, or assignment. Do we still need to bring printed copies? The correct answer is D. The question is asking whether printed copies are still required. Answer D clearly says they're not, and the digital versions are acceptable instead. I assumed the lab equipment was available today. The correct answer is C. Answer A might seem tempting, but it's too vague because it doesn't explain what is busy or why the equipment isn't available. Answer C, however, clearly explains the situation. The equipment is not available because it's being serviced. I'm having trouble locating the annex building. The correct answer is B. An annex building is a smaller building connected to or associated with the main building. It can sometimes be harder to find because it may be behind the main building, in another wing, or in a courtyard. Answer A does make sense, since annexes can indeed be confusing. But the most appropriate response to someone saying they can't find a building is to tell them where it is. So B, which gives the location, is clearly the best answer. Remember, your goal in this task is always to choose the most appropriate response to what the speaker says. Great, now it's time for the second task type. Listen to a conversation. In this task, you will hear a very short conversation between two people and then answer two multiple choice questions about it. I'll give you 1 minute to complete both questions, which is about 30 seconds per question. Just keep in mind that the time I'm giving you here doesn't necessarily reflect the exact timing of test day. On the actual TOEFL, you'll complete the entire listening section in about 29 minutes, including both modules. So in reality, the time available per task can be quite limited, possibly even less than what I'm giving you now. But since this is practice, we'll keep it at 30 seconds per question. Alright, let's get started. Listen to a conversation.
Were you able to finalize the venue reservation for the workshop?
Not yet. The booking system kept timing out when I tried earlier.
That's annoying. Did you reach out to the events office?
I thought I'd give it another shot this afternoon first.
We're getting close to the deadline, though.
I know. If it's still acting up later, I'll contact them directly.
The correct answer to question 1 is B. The scheduling platform isn't responding. The woman says the booking system kept timing out, which means it wasn't working properly. The correct answer to question 2 is A. Attempt the booking again before seeking help. She says she'll try again this afternoon and only contact the events office if it's still not working. Overall, this task type isn't very difficult unless you run into one of two issues: limited vocabulary or loss of concentration. We address both of these in our new TOEFL course. It's designed so that as you move from lecture to lecture, you not only become familiar with the test structure, practice answering questions, and learn essential strategies, but also gradually build your vocabulary. Many of the words introduced in the early lessons keep appearing in later ones, so you naturally retain them and they become part of your active vocabulary. By the time you reach the writing section, you already have a solid vocabulary base to start using in your responses. Then, in the speaking section, you apply that same vocabulary again in spoken answers. This approach helps you expand your vocabulary quickly but efficiently. Instead of memorizing long word lists that you soon forget, you learn vocabulary in context and start using it from the very first lessons. As for losing concentration, even during short conversations, many test takers struggle with this. In the course, I share one key strategy: what exactly to listen for in the conversation so you don't lose focus and can confidently answer the second question. You can find the course link in the description below. Now, let's look at some of the most challenging vocabulary items from this task. You will now see the transcript on the conversation on your screen. Word number 1 is venue. A venue is a place where an event happens. For example, a wedding venue or a conference venue. In the conversation, the speaker said the venue reservation for the workshop. 2. A workshop. A workshop is a small practical session where people actively learn or practice something. That's different from a lecture where you mainly listen to a speaker. In a workshop, participants are usually engaged in activities. Next, there was the phrase, "the booking system kept timing out" when I tried earlier. To time out means to stop working because a system takes too long to respond or loses connection. It's commonly used when talking about computer systems. In the dialogue, it refers to the booking website, which stopped responding and likely closed. Then we heard, "I'd give it another shot this afternoon first." To give it another shot is an idiomatic expression that means to try again. The speaker means she'll try to book the venue again herself this afternoon before asking for help. Another phrase that might raise questions is, "If it's still acting up later, I'll contact them directly." When a machine or system acts up, it means it isn't working properly. For example, my car always acts up in cold weather. In other words, it malfunctions or it doesn't work as it should. Finally, to seek help simply means to ask for help. Great! Next comes the listen to an announcement task. It's very similar to the listen to a conversation task, but this time you'll hear a short announcement and then answer 2 multiple choice questions about it. All right, let's get started. Listen to an announcement on campus transportation radio. Attention commuters, due to resurfacing work on the East Campus roadway, the shuttle route serving the engineering quad will be diverted beginning Monday morning and continuing through Thursday. During this period, passengers should board at the temporary stop near the Student Services building, approximately a 2-minute walk from the usual location. Updated route maps are available on the transportation website. Thank you for your flexibility. Okay, it's time to check your answers. Question 1. What is the main purpose of the announcement? This is a very common question type for announcements. The audio here was quite dense. Remember, your goal is to understand the main idea, not every small detail. The speaker says, "Attention commuters, due to resurfacing work on the East Campus roadway, the shuttle route serving the engineering quad will be diverted beginning Monday morning and continuing through Thursday." So, what's the key takeaway? Because of road work, the shuttle route will be diverted for a few days. By the way, to divert means to make something change direction. For example, our flight was diverted from San Francisco to Oakland because of fog. That means the plane had to go to a different destination. So the core idea is this. Something normally goes one way, but after it's diverted, it goes another way. In this case, the shuttle won't follow the usual route. It will go a different way for a short period. So the correct answer is C, to inform riders of a route adjustment. An adjustment is a small change, and a route is the path from one place to another. As for the second question, passengers are advised to board at the temporary stop near the Student Services building. In other words, they should get on the shuttle at a different stop. So, the correct answer is clearly B, walk to an alternate boarding point. To board a shuttle, bus, or plane means to get onto it. That's where the word boarding in airports comes from. The adjective alternate simply means another or different. Well done! By the way, share in the comments how many mistakes you made while doing this listening test and how difficult the questions were for you. Maybe they were a piece of cake, or maybe some of them were quite challenging. Let me know. It's always interesting to compare everyone's experiences. Now, let's move on to the final and most challenging task of the listening section, academic talk. This task is the reason you still need academic vocabulary to succeed in the TOEFL listening section. As you saw previously, we mostly dealt with everyday vocabulary and college vocabulary, but this task is designed to check your knowledge of academic vocabulary. You will listen to a slightly longer lecture. After the talk, you will have to answer 4 multiple choice questions. Let's get started. Listen to a talk in an environmental science class. Today, we're going to examine the concept of keystone species. A keystone species is a species that has a disproportionately large effect on its ecosystem relative to its abundance. In other words, even though it may not be very numerous, its presence strongly influences the structure of the entire ecological community. One classic example involves sea otters along the Pacific coast. Sea otters feed on sea urchins, which in turn consume kelp. When otter populations decline, sea urchin numbers increase rapidly, and they overgraze kelp forests. Because kelp provides habitat for many marine organisms, the loss of kelp leads to widespread ecosystem changes. Restoring otter populations often allows kelp forests to recover, along with the many species that depend on them. Keystone effects can also occur on land. For instance, certain large predators regulate herbivore populations. When these predators disappear, herbivores may overconsume vegetation, altering plant communities and reducing biodiversity. So, the predator's influence extends far beyond its direct prey. Understanding keystone species is important for conservation planning. Protecting or reintroducing such species can help restore ecological balance more efficiently than focusing on many species individually. In the next part of the lecture, we'll consider how scientists identify keystone species in complex ecosystems. What is the main topic of the talk? This is the main idea question. For this type of question, it's important to choose answers that express broader, more general ideas, the big picture, rather than specific details. Sometimes an answer option may include information that does appear in the lecture, but still doesn't represent the overall main idea. For example, answer D contains information from the talk. The speaker does mention that protecting or reintroducing such species can help restore ecological balance more efficiently than focusing on many species individually. So yes, the lecture briefly refers to restoring ecosystems. The central idea of the talk is keystone species, species that have a very large impact on their environment, even if their population is small. So the correct answer is B. Species whose ecological impact exceeds, in other words, is greater than their numbers. Second question, why does the speaker mention sea otters? This can be tricky because many of you might be tempted to choose answer A. After all, the lecturer says that when sea otter populations decline, sea urchin numbers increase rapidly and they overgraze kelp forests. Because kelp provides habitat for many marine organisms, the loss of kelp leads to widespread ecosystem changes. So it may seem like the point is about predator removal affecting food chains. But that's not actually the speaker's purpose here. And one clue is the word removal in answer A. The lecturer never says sea otters were removed. It only says that their populations declined. That's not the same thing. More importantly, sea otters are introduced as a classic example of a keystone species. And what defines a keystone species? It's a species whose ecological impact is very large, even if its population is relatively small. In other words, it strongly influences the entire ecosystem. So, the reason the speaker mentions sea otters is to illustrate a species with a powerful ecosystem influence. That's why the correct answer is C, to illustrate a species with a strong ecosystem influence. Question 3. The correct answer is B. Their absence can indirectly alter plant communities. To alter means to change. If you're not sure why this is correct, look at this part of the lecture. Keystone effects can also occur on land. For instance, certain large predators regulate herbivore populations. When these predators disappear, herbivores may overconsume vegetation, altering plant communities and reducing biodiversity. So the predator's influence extends far beyond its direct prey. So when predators disappear, herbivores overconsume plants, which changes plant communities. That's exactly what answer B states. As for the final question about what the speaker will most likely discuss next, the correct answer is D. Criteria scientists use to determine keystone species. That's because the speaker ends by saying, in the next part of the lecture, we'll consider how scientists identify keystone species in complex ecosystems. The hardest task in the TOEFL listening section is the listen to an academic talk task. So what is this task really about? What kind of questions will you get after the talk? Will knowing them actually help you answer correctly? What are the most effective strategies to prepare? And how can I practice for free? I'm going to answer all of these questions in today's video. We'll also complete 2 new Listen to an Academic Talk tasks, one on psychology and the other on environmental science. Let's get started. So, what is the Listen to an Academic Talk task about? It's a short lecture similar to something you might hear in a high school or college class. The topic can be anything academic: history, science, economics, social sciences, art, music, and more. Basically anything you would normally hear in an academic setting. After the talk, you'll answer 4 multiple choice questions. Now, what kind of questions should you expect? The first question is usually about the main idea, but it won't always sound the same. You might hear, What is the talk mainly about? What is the main topic of the talk? What is the topic of the lecture? Different wording, same task. You need to identify the main idea. Another question you'll most likely get, though not always as the second one, is why does the speaker mention? For example, why does the speaker mention renewable energy? Or why does the speaker mention coffee mugs? Now, the other two questions can vary from task to task, but there is one question you should always anticipate. What will the speaker most likely discuss next? This question is usually the last one, question number 4. Now, it's not guaranteed that you'll get it every time, but I still strongly recommend expecting it in every listen to an academic talk task. Why? Because the answer is usually hidden in the very last sentence of the talk. And here's the problem. If you're not listening carefully at the end, what happens? You start to lose focus, you get distracted, you feel tired, or you simply don't expect anything important to come at the very end. And because of that, you might miss the key information. And you could get the last question wrong. And that's a big deal. Because that's one of the 4 questions, which means you lose a quarter of your score for this task. So here's what you should do. Always keep this question in mind. What will the speaker most likely discuss next? And as the lecture is coming to an end, become extra careful. Let's talk about the strategy. What are the most effective ways to prepare for this task? The best way is actually quite simple. You need to listen to short academic lectures, ideally around 5 to 10 minutes long. But here's the key part. After listening, you should answer 3 questions. What is the main topic of the talk? Why does the speaker mention? What will the speaker most likely discuss next? For the last 2 questions, you'll need to use a bit of imagination. Let's start with the second one. Why does the speaker mention? Here you actually create the question yourself. Take any term from the lecture and complete the question. For example, why does the speaker mention fossil records? Just make sure this word is not the main topic of the lecture. It should be a detail, not the central idea. Now, the third question, what will the speaker most likely discuss next? Even if the speaker doesn't clearly say what comes next, you should try to predict it. Use the information from the lecture and think, what would logically come next? This is exactly the kind of thinking TOEFL expects from you. The next question is, how can you practice for free? There are 3 resources I can recommend. First, you can use lectures on the Daily Dictation website. Go to Start Now, then choose TOEFL Listening, Section 1, Lecture 1. Then scroll down until you see full audio play and transcript and press play. One important rule here, do not look at the transcript while listening. This resource is very convenient because you also get the transcript. So if you didn't catch a word or a phrase, you can go back, check it, and look it up in the dictionary. The only downside is this. You can't play the audio without opening the transcript unless you download it and listen to it separately. The second resource is a bit more challenging, but also very effective. It's the official YouTube channel of the University of Wisconsin-Madison. Go to the channel, open playlists, and scroll down to 5-minute lectures. There, you'll find short academic lectures that are very similar to the TOEFL. The speed, the style, the vocabulary, everything feels realistic. And the best part? Each lecture is on a different topic. So while you practice listening, you also build your academic vocabulary. And finally, the third option, you also get practice exercises inside our TOEFL course. After each lecture, where we explain everything you need to know, you get additional practice tasks that are very similar to the real exam. The interface is very simple and easy to use. First, you listen to the lecture without seeing the transcript. Then you answer the questions, and only after that, you open the transcript, review it, and write down the words you didn't know. This is very important. because this method saves you time and energy. Instead of writing down every new word, you only focus on the words that actually prevented you from getting the correct answer. And that changes everything. You feel less overwhelmed, you stay motivated, and your progress becomes much faster. I use the same strategy with my one-on-one students, and I consistently see better and quicker results. Now, this last resource is not completely free, but the practice part comes as a free addition to the course. And honestly, this matters, because many courses give you theory, but not just enough practice. And with the new TOEFL format, good practice materials are still quite limited. That's exactly why we made sure to include practice right after every explanation, so you can immediately apply what you've learned. This turns the course into a complete, step-by-step guide to help you reach your target score. Let's move to the most important part, practice. We're going to complete 2 listen to an academic talk tasks. First, you'll have time to do them on your own. Then, I'll walk you through the correct answers and explain exactly why they are correct. Let's begin. Academic Talk 1. Listen to a talk in a psychology class. Today, I'd like to discuss a concept in decision-making known as cognitive dissonance. Cognitive dissonance refers to the mental discomfort people experience when they hold 2 conflicting beliefs, or when their behavior doesn't match their beliefs. Because this discomfort is unpleasant, people are usually motivated to reduce it. One common way they do this is by changing their attitudes after making a difficult decision. For example, imagine someone choosing between 2 equally appealing job offers. After accepting one position, the person often begins to focus more on the positive aspects of the chosen job and downplay the advantages of the rejected one. The shift helps justify the decision and reduces internal conflict. Another situation where cognitive dissonance occurs is when people behave in ways that contradict their values. Suppose someone who cares deeply about environmental protection frequently uses disposable plastic products. Rather than changing their behavior immediately, the person might instead adjust beliefs, perhaps by telling themselves that individual actions don't really matter. This reinterpretation lessens the psychological tension. Because cognitive dissonance influences how people evaluate their choices and actions, it plays an important role in shaping attitudes over time. Next, we'll look at experimental evidence showing how strongly this effect can alter people's preferences. Well, let's check your answers. Question 1. What is the talk mainly about? The correct answer is B, a psychological process that reduces conflict between beliefs and behavior. Why? The entire talk is about cognitive dissonance. First, the speaker defines this term and then gives 2 examples of when cognitive dissonance occurs. So in fact, we simply have to find the definition of cognitive dissonance. According to the talk, cognitive dissonance refers to the mental discomfort people experience when they hold 2 conflicting beliefs, or when their behavior doesn't match their beliefs. Because this discomfort isn't pleasant, people are usually motivated to reduce it. Simply put, we feel discomfort and try to reduce it. When we have 2 conflicting beliefs, or when our behavior doesn't match our beliefs. The sentence that best communicates this idea is sentence B, a psychological process that reduces conflict between beliefs and behavior. Answer A is tempting, but it's incorrect because it only mentions one detail from the talk, not its main topic. Question 2. Why does the speaker mention choosing between 2 job offers? The correct answer is B again, to illustrate how people adjust evaluations after decisions. Why? The speaker said the following. One common way they do this is by changing their attitudes after making a difficult decision. Then, he gave the example of choosing between 2 job offers. He said, for example, imagine someone choosing between 2 equally appealing job offers. After accepting one position, the person often begins to focus more on the positive aspects of the chosen job and downplay the advantages of the rejected one. This shift helps justify the decision and reduces internal conflict. So the example about choosing between 2 job offers illustrates the point that one common way they do this is by changing their attitudes after making a difficult decision. It means that one common way to reduce mental discomfort is by changing your attitude, meaning how you feel about something, after making a difficult decision. Simply put, you make a decision and then convince yourself that you made the right choice. By the way, notice how answer B is almost an exact copy of the sentence from the talk in terms of meaning, but it's very well paraphrased. Compare. To illustrate how people adjust evaluations after decisions, one common way they do this is by changing their attitudes after making a difficult decision. The verb to adjust is a synonym for the verb to change. Evaluations is similar to attitudes. After decisions means the same as after making a difficult decision. Question 3. What does the speaker suggest about people who use disposable plastic, despite caring about the environment? The correct answer is C. They may reinterpret beliefs to reduce discomfort. The speaker said, suppose someone who cares deeply about environmental protection frequently uses disposable plastic products. Disposable plastic products look like this. Then the speaker added, rather than changing behavior immediately, the person might instead adjust beliefs, perhaps by telling themselves that individual actions don't really matter. This means that instead of stopping using plastic products altogether, the person changes their beliefs. They tell themselves, my actions can't do much harm. I'm just one person. My behavior can't affect the environment that much. The speaker wrapped up this idea by saying, this reinterpretation lessens the psychological tension. So the change in beliefs reduces psychological tension or simply makes a person feel better about the situation. This is exactly what answer C says. They may reinterpret beliefs to reduce discomfort. To reinterpret means to change what you think the meaning of something is. Simply put, to reinterpret beliefs means to change beliefs. So people change their beliefs to reduce discomfort. In other words, make the discomfort less. Discomfort here is a synonym for psychological tension, while the verb to reinterpret is a synonym for the verb to change. Question 4. What will the speaker most likely discuss next? Remember, this is the question we normally expect at the end of the lecture, because the answer to it might be mentioned at the very end of the talk. The correct answer is D. Research studies demonstrating cognitive dissonance effects. Why? The last thing the speaker said was, next, we'll look at experimental evidence showing how strongly this effect can alter people's preferences. So we will look at some evidence or proof that shows how strongly this effect, meaning the effect of cognitive dissonance, can alter or change people's preferences. Let's make it even simpler. We'll talk about things that prove cognitive dissonance has strong effects on something. Answer D says just that. Research studies demonstrating cognitive dissonance effects. Research studies is a synonym for evidence. The verb to show is a synonym for the verb to demonstrate. This effect means the same as cognitive dissonance effects. Well done! Now you will listen to one more academic talk. Try to complete it on your own first, and then I'll give you the correct answers. I won't explain every answer in detail this time because that would make the video too long. But this is a great chance to practice what we've already covered and also build your academic vocabulary. Let's get started. Academic Talk 2. Listen to a talk in an environmental science class. Today, we'll examine the concept of ecological resilience. Ecological resilience refers to the ability of an ecosystem to absorb disturbances and still maintain its essential structure and functions. In other words, a resilient ecosystem can experience disruption, yet continue operating without collapsing into a completely different state. Disturbances occur frequently in nature. Wildfires, storms, and even human activities can temporarily alter ecosystems. However, resilience determines whether these systems recover or undergo lasting transformation. For example, many grassland ecosystems have evolved with periodic fires. After a fire removes old vegetation, grasses often regrow rapidly because their root systems remain intact underground. In this case, fire actually contributes to ecological stability. In contrast, ecosystems with low resilience may change dramatically after a disturbance. Consider coral reefs exposed to prolonged water pollution. Once key coral species decline, algae can dominate the reef environment. The shift makes it difficult for coral populations to recover, fundamentally altering the ecosystem. Because of this, scientists increasingly study resilience when designing conservation strategies. Protecting biodiversity and reducing environmental stress can strengthen an ecosystem's ability to recover from disturbances. Next, we'll explore specific methods researchers use to measure resilience in coastal ecosystems. Question 1. What is the main topic of the talk? The correct answer is C. Factors that determine how ecosystems respond to disturbances. Question 2. Why does the speaker mention grassland fires? The correct answer is A. To illustrate a disturbance that ecosystems can recover from. Question 3. What point does the speaker make about coral reefs? The correct answer is D. Pollution can trigger long-term ecosystem changes. Question 4. What will the speaker most likely discuss next? Answer C is correct. Techniques used to evaluate ecological resilience. Now that you've completed the practice test and worked through the lecture analysis, you should have a much clearer picture of your TOEFL listening performance. More importantly, I hope you've noticed something. Success in TOEFL listening is not only about understanding English. It's about understanding how TOEFL listening works. The students who improve the fastest are usually not the students who know the most English. They're the students who learn to recognize patterns, identify important information, and avoid the traps that cost points. So if you found yourself missing questions in the lecture section, don't be discouraged. Academic lectures are often the most demanding part of the TOEFL listening test, which is exactly why they're worth practicing. So, if you'd like to continue working on these skills, check out the resources in the description below. Inside the course, we go much deeper into lecture analysis, question types, and the patterns that appear repeatedly on the TOEFL exam. And before you leave, let me know your score in the comments. How many questions did you get right? I'm always curious to see how students perform before they start training these skills more systematically. What prevents you from scoring high on the TOEFL 2026 writing section? Just 4 things: limited time, limited vocabulary, poor knowledge of grammar rules, and slow typing. In this video, we'll address one of these problems: limited vocabulary. We'll begin with the most important tips for the TOEFL writing section. Then we'll do a writing vocabulary boost. After that, we'll discuss 20 words you need to know for TOEFL writing. And finally, we'll wrap up this video by learning the most important linking words for the TOEFL writing test. Make sure to watch the video until the end so you can be as prepared as possible for test day. For high-scoring speaking and writing templates, as well as extra PDFs with sentence structure, punctuation, preposition drills, free access to the TOEFL practice platform, and a 5% discount on the TOEFL test itself, click the link below. The first thing every student should know is the golden rule of the TOEFL writing section. The more you write, the higher your score will be. This rule applies to both the old and the new versions of the test. So rule number 1 is write much more than is required. One of my students scored a perfect 6 on the writing section because her essays were much longer than the minimum requirement. Many TOEFL test takers don't realize that if a prompt asks for more than 100 words, it doesn't mean you can write 105 words and still get a high score. With only 105 words, you simply can't provide the level of elaboration needed for a 5 out of 5 score. For the writing for an academic discussion task, for example, you should write at least 140 words, and preferably 150 to 170 if you want a high score. This brings us to rule number 2. Your typing speed needs to be fast. Whenever I tell people that they should write 150 to 170 words in just 10 minutes, they ask, how am I supposed to do that? That's too much. I can barely formulate my ideas and write 100 words in that amount of time. There are 2 things you should do to make this possible. First, improve your typing speed and accuracy so that you can type very quickly with minimal errors. Second, learn common advanced collocations to use in your responses. We'll talk about vocabulary a bit later in this video, so let's focus on typing speed and accuracy first. Remember, the faster you type, the better your chances of scoring high on this part of the test. To practice typing, you can use any free online tool. I usually recommend the Fast Fingers website, which allows you to practice daily using 3 modes: a basic 200-word test, a 1,000-word test, and custom typing tests. Start with the basic 200-word test and spend about 15 to 30 minutes a day typing the words as fast as you can. Once you feel more confident, switch to the 1,000-word test. After a few more days, begin working on custom typing tests. For custom tests, you can paste sample essays, emails, reading passages, or listening scripts. Anything that contains vocabulary commonly used in the TOEFL test will work well. Now, rule number 3 is work on your spelling. Well, it's okay to make occasional spelling mistakes. If almost every word you type is misspelled, you won't be able to get a high score. We're so used to relying on the autocorrect feature on our phones and laptops that we can't imagine typing without mistakes. In the TOEFL writing section, you should be able to produce at least some error-free sentences. If your writing contains spelling, grammar, or vocabulary mistakes all the time, it becomes very difficult to get a high score. The good news is that improving your typing speed often improves your spelling as well. As you type more, you repeatedly see how various words are spelled, and this helps you remember them. Reading a lot in English can also help significantly since it naturally improves your spelling accuracy. And finally, whenever you practice the TOEFL writing section, make sure to disable all autocorrect features and rely on your own knowledge. Now, ask yourself, when do you usually waste time while writing? Right, it's when you're thinking about which word to use, how to express something more clearly, or which grammar structure to choose. That is why rule number 4 is make your grammar and vocabulary automatic. First of all, study grammar. From my experience, focusing on just a few key grammar topics can significantly improve your score because it eliminates about 70% of the mistakes students typically make. If your preparation time is limited, briefly review the following: tenses, at least the most common ones, such as the present simple, the present continuous, the past simple, and the present perfect. Articles, punctuation, prepositions, gerunds, and infinitives. Don't spend too much time studying rules in isolation. Start applying them and focus on one topic at a time when you write, until it's no longer a problem for you. For example, let's say you're working on articles. First, quickly review the most basic rules. Then start doing exercise after exercise and analyze your mistakes. After that, begin writing emails and writing for an academic discussion responses and check them only for article mistakes. As soon as you notice that you've stopped making mistakes, or you're making no more than one mistake per response, move on to the next topic. This approach will help you take your writing to the next level. For vocabulary, make a list of universal advanced expressions that you can use and try to introduce 5 of them in each essay. I suggest making 2 lists, one for universal advanced words for the writing for an academic discussion task, and one for topic-specific words for your emails. I usually give these lists to my students, but you can also create them yourself by extracting vocabulary from the reading section of the test. For example, from the Read an Academic Text task, you can write down words such as integral, obtain, boost, decline, and so on, and add them to your list of universal advanced words. You can also write down words such as vibrant, goodies, veggies, a must-have, and so on from the Read in Daily Life tasks. These tasks have a lot of valuable vocabulary, so add these words to your topic-specific word list for emails. Every time you work on a new writing task, Look at your lists and think about which phrases are relevant to your topic. Speaking of vocabulary, rule number 5 is to avoid repetition. When writing, ensure that the same word or phrase isn't repeated in 2 consecutive sentences or close together. Think of a synonym, a different way to phrase it, or simply omit the word. For example, you can say study remotely instead of online education, with the advent of instead of with the arrival of, and so on. Sometimes simply restructuring the sentence so that the repeated word isn't necessary is really effective. I like to use the word counter website to check keyword density. It also helps you see how many words your response contains and shows the level of your vocabulary. Ideally, you want the reading level to be that of a college student or a college graduate. This usually means your grammar and vocabulary are strong. Of course, this isn't a 100% guarantee, but if you're preparing on your own, it's a useful way to evaluate your performance. Now, rule number 6 is to include 7 to 10 advanced words or phrases in your essays. In our TOEFL 2026 prep course, we provide students with checklists for 5 out of 5 writing for an academic discussion tasks and emails. One item on the checklists is making sure that the essay or email contains enough high-level vocabulary. Without such words, your essay is very unlikely to receive a score higher than 3.5 out of 5. Of course, if you're writing an informal email, your vocabulary should match the tone. You wouldn't ask a friend to provide assistance on a matter, just as you wouldn't use phrasal verbs like come over, hang out, or go through in a formal email. In the course, we have 4 lectures dedicated entirely to vocabulary, where we discuss the most common phrases you can use to increase your score. I usually recommend studying collocations, such as an indispensable part of something, a fundamental element of, adversely affect, and similar expressions. Learning vocabulary this way makes it easier to remember and helps you write more naturally. If you struggle with vocabulary and feel you need extra support, feel free to check out the link below. Now, rule number 7 is to avoid using extremely basic words such as good or bad. Think of 2 to 3 fancier alternatives to these words that you can use every time you want to say something is good or bad. For example, let's say I want to say that online education is good for students. I might write, online education is beneficial for students. Online education is advantageous for students. Online education has a positive effect on students, and so on. Doing so will save you a lot of time and actually improve your advanced vocabulary. Rule number 8 is to review sentence types. Many students don't consider this aspect crucial. However, knowing what types of sentences exist and how to use them properly helps you with punctuation and allows you to create clear, easy to understand sentences. If you write a lot and use advanced vocabulary, you might get a high score even with minor grammar mistakes, such as forgetting an article, using the wrong article, or forgetting an S at the end of a word. Still, if your essay is difficult to understand, the person reading it, which will be AI in the new format, will think, whoa, what does he or she want to say here? I don't understand. Then you will never get a high score. So, make sure to review simple, complex, compound, and complex compound sentences, as well as ways to enhance your writing, such as using noun, adjective, and gerund clauses, linking words, and lists. This will help you produce error-free sentences, which will increase your writing score. And finally, speaking of error-free sentences, rule number 9 is to make sure your essay or email contains them. While it's normal to make some grammar and vocabulary mistakes, your entry should also have parts that are completely error-free. When you review your responses, make sure you have at least a few sentences without any mistakes. Take a look at this task. This is the Write for an Academic Discussion task, which comes at the very end of the TOEFL writing section. Now, imagine this. You need to read the instructions, understand the professor's post, analyze 2 student opinions, choose your own position, different from both, and then write a clear response of about 150 to 170 words. All of that in just 10 minutes. So, what do you really need to succeed here? Of course, fast typing helps. Good grammar matters too. But more than anything, you need to know what to say. In other words, you need ideas. Where do ideas come from? From vocabulary. If you already know 5 or 6 strong words related to the topic, writing becomes much faster and much easier. On top of that, using more advanced words and phrases helps you sound more precise, more natural, and more confident, which directly improves your score. So today, I want to show you something very practical. This is exactly what I often do with my students in individual lessons. We're going to take simple sentences and upgrade them, making them more concise, more advanced, and more effective. You'll see a sentence, and your task is to say the same thing in a better way. And here's an important idea to remember. Better writing is often shorter writing. The more concise you are, the stronger your response becomes. Ready? Let's begin. And one more thing, I've decided to call this series Boost Your Writing, so make sure to subscribe and check out the full playlist on the channel. And tell me in the comments if you enjoy this format and want more videos like this. And here is your first sentence. Junk food is bad for your health. Pause the video now and try to rewrite it in a more advanced way. Ready? Let's look at my version. Fast food adversely affects people's health. Instead of saying is bad for, you can say adversely affects. Just be careful here, you don't need a preposition after the verb affect. So remember, be bad for someone, adversely affect someone. There is another strong option. Have an adverse effect on someone. Notice the preposition on after effect. So we could also say, fast food has an adverse effect on people's health. And here is one more. Fast food negatively impacts people's health. So anytime you want to say that something is bad for a person's health, finances, career, or life in general, you can upgrade your sentence using one of the phrases. Adversely affects, has an adverse effect on, negatively impacts. Now, are these the only options? Of course not, but we're focusing on the most useful and practical ones for now. Sentence 2. Eating healthy food is good for a long life. How can we improve this? First, instead of saying eating healthy food, we can make it more natural and concise. Healthy eating. Now, let's look at a long life. A better option here is long-term health. It's not exactly the same, but it sounds more natural and more precise in an academic context. So, the sentence becomes, healthy eating is good for your long-term health. Now, here's another option. Instead of eating healthy food, we can say eating healthily. So we get, eating healthily is good for one's long-term health. Or even simpler, eating healthily is good for long-term health. And one more small detail, instead of your, you can use one's to sound more formal and academic. Now, what if you don't want to repeat the word good again and again in your essay? You can easily upgrade it. For example, you can use the words beneficial or key. So instead of saying eating healthy food is good for a long life, you can say eating healthy food is beneficial for a long life. Or Eating healthy food is key to a long life. It's a simple change, but it immediately makes your writing sound more advanced and more precise. Here is the idea. When something brings a positive result, you can say it's beneficial for, or it's key to. Just be careful with this one. After the adjective key, you need the preposition to. For example, education is key to success. Maintaining a work-life balance is key to having a successful family. Sentence 3. I found this movie really interesting. I found this movie incredibly interesting. If you use a simple adjective like interesting, you can make your sentence sound more professional by improving the adverb that comes before it. Instead of using very or really, try some strong alternatives. For example, incredibly interesting, extremely interesting, highly interesting. These words have slightly different shades of meaning, but in TOEFL writing, you can generally use them in a similar way. If something is interesting, but not very interesting, you can use softer adverbs like particularly or quite. For example, I found this movie particularly interesting. I found this movie quite interesting. What about synonyms for the word interesting itself? In this context, one of the best options is engaging. I found this movie incredibly engaging. If you're talking about other things that can be interesting, you can also use the adjective fascinating, often with adverbs like absolutely or truly. We often use this when talking about learning new things, such as cultures, places, or people's experiences. For example, I find people's personal stories absolutely fascinating. I find learning about other cultures absolutely fascinating. So, interesting equals engaging equals fascinating. Very equals really equals truly equals incredibly equals extremely and highly. Sentence 4. There are not enough natural resources in the world. There is a shortage of resources worldwide. Or even shorter, resources are scarce worldwide. When something is scarce, it means there is not enough of it. In other words, there is a shortage. You can also vary the phrase in the world. In the world, worldwide, globally, around the globe. For example, resources are scarce around the globe. As you can see, the sentences are getting more and more difficult. By the way, what's a more advanced way to say more and more? Increasingly. The sentences are becoming increasingly difficult. And that's intentional. I want to test how well you know different types of vocabulary. If you like this approach to learning new words and expanding your vocabulary, and your TOEFL test is approaching, click the link below and sign up for our updated TOEFL preparation course. You'll get 2 lectures focused on essential writing vocabulary and 3 lectures on important speaking vocabulary, including topic-specific words you need for both listen and repeat and taken interview tasks. Since most test takers have limited time to prepare, I included only the most relevant words that will truly help you improve your speaking and writing scores and express your ideas naturally on almost any topic. You'll also get access to extra resources such as common combinations with prepositions, basic sentence structure, and a punctuation guide for writing. These will help you avoid many common grammar mistakes. In addition, you'll get speaking and writing templates to organize your responses clearly and generate ideas quickly. I'll also show you how to improve your typing skills quickly and more. If your test is coming up soon, you can watch the lessons anytime, which makes it easy to fit your preparation into just a few days. You'll also get access to a practice platform that simulates the real test, so you don't need to search for materials online. And of course, if you are unsure about any part, you can schedule a consultation with me, which can help you quickly improve your score by 1 or 2 points. Sentence 5. We can see that the gap between rich and poor people is getting bigger today. That's an interesting sentence. If the gap is getting bigger, it means it's growing. So instead of using a longer structure, we can place the word growing before the noun gap. We can see a growing gap between the rich and the poor these days. While today is perfectly fine, you can also replace it with a collocation these days. Just be careful with nowadays. It's very common and can sound a bit overused in TOEFL writing. You can see how much shorter and more natural the sentence becomes. Also, the phrase the rich and the poor means rich people and poor people. This is called substantivation in English. It's a process where adjectives and sometimes participles are used as nouns. For example, rich people, the rich; poor people, the poor; elderly people, the elderly; young people, the young; injured people, the injured. This trick is extremely helpful on the test because it helps you reduce your use of the word people, which many students tend to overuse in their responses. Sentence 6. Let's say I want to continue my idea and write, social groups are becoming more separate and the middle class is getting smaller. So now I have two sentences. We can see a growing gap between the rich and the poor these days. And the second sentence, social groups are becoming more separate and the middle class is getting smaller. How can we combine them and improve the second sentence? We can keep the first sentence as it is and then add extra detail using the structure with plus noun plus ing. We can see a growing gap between the rich and the poor these days, with social classes becoming more distinct and the middle class shrinking. Here we replace separate with distinct and getting smaller with shrinking to make the sentence more precise and natural. So the phrase with social classes becoming more distinct and the middle class shrinking adds extra information to the main idea in a more compact and advanced way. This structure is often used to add extra information about a situation. It usually describes something happening at the same time or gives additional detail or background. For example, the company expanded rapidly, with more people joining every month. At the same time, new people were joining. This structure is very common in written and academic English, so make sure to write it down and practice it until it becomes automatic. Using the right words and phrases can make your TOEFL essays clear and well organized. Here are 9 universal ones that work in almost any type of essay. I'll explain each one simply and provide examples to show how you can use them. Don't forget to keep track of how many words you know. Create 2 columns, write the words you know in one column and the ones you don't know in the other. Then share how many words you know in the comments below. The first word on our list is significant. This word means important and can be used in almost any context, from education to technology to health. It sounds more formal than simply saying important. In TOEFL writing, you can mention significant changes, achievements, progress, impacts, and much more, making this word incredibly versatile and perfect for our goal. Let's look at some examples. Technology has had a significant impact on the way people communicate in modern society. The internet has brought about significant advancements in education. Climate change represents a significant threat to biodiversity. As you can see, this word can be used in almost any essay. Word number 2 is challenge. This is a great word to describe difficulties or problems. A challenge is something difficult or demanding. For example, one major challenge of studying abroad is adapting to a new culture. You can use this word with verbs like pose, represent, or face. If something is a big problem, you can write, it represents a significant challenge too. There's also the verb to challenge. It means to test someone's ability or to question an idea. The professor challenged students to think critically. If something is difficult, you can say that it's challenging. For example, balancing work and study is a challenging task for many students. To summarize, we have the noun challenge, the verb to challenge, and the adjective challenging. Word number 3, benefit. This word is useful for describing positive outcomes or advantages. It fits in essays about education, technology, health, or almost any other topic. You can mention significant, long-term, or immediate benefits. Examples. A major benefit of online education is that it allows students to learn at their own pace. One of the key benefits of bilingual education is improved cognitive flexibility in children. When thinking about verbs that often go with this word, consider these 3: reap, offer, and derive. They aren't overly common, so they'll make your writing stand out. Some examples here are: employees reap benefits when companies invest in their professional development. Telemedicine offers significant benefits to people in remote areas. Students derive benefits from collaborative learning environments. Another great word many students underestimate is solution. When talking about how to solve a problem, this word is perfect. It's often paired with adjectives like effective or practical. Investing in renewable energy is a practical solution to reduce pollution. There is also a great phrase with this word that you can use in your essays. It's to offer a viable solution to. To offer a viable solution to a problem means to provide an effective and practical way to solve a problem or address an issue. The solution should be realistic, workable, and capable of achieving the desired outcome. For example, scientists are working hard to offer a viable solution to climate change. Online education platforms aim to offer a viable solution to the lack of access to quality education in remote regions. So let's revise. You can say, to address an issue, to solve a problem, to find a practical solution, or to offer a viable solution to some problem. Feel free to use these phrases in your essays. Word number 6 is impact. This is a versatile word for describing effects or changes. It can be used in essays about technology, the environment, or even personal development. Whatever topic you choose, chances are high you'll need this word. A typical sentence you can use in your writing for an academic discussion task is social media has a profound impact on how people interact with one another. Now, impacts can be positive, negative, profound, or lasting. Examples. Educational reforms have a lasting impact on future generations. Deforestation has a detrimental impact on wildlife habitats. If you're discussing negative effects, use the adjective detrimental. For instance, a detrimental impact on something. There is also the verb to impact. Rising fuel prices significantly impact low-income families, while the phrase to have an impact on something requires the preposition on. No preposition is necessary after the verb to impact. Remember, a large vocabulary is crucial, but it's not the only key to success in the TOEFL writing section. To achieve a high score, you also need to 1. Fully explain your position in a clear and convincing way in the writing for an academic discussion task. 2. Choose the right information from the reading and the listening, and then organize it naturally in your essay. 3. Use an effective structure. And 4. Avoid grammar mistakes that could obscure your meaning. Without these elements, even advanced English learners can struggle to score 26+ in the writing section. That's why our TOEFL course is designed to cover every aspect you need for success. You'll get templates that help you score 26+, step-by-step guidance on structuring your answers, expert tips to avoid common mistakes, and maximize your score. Click the link below to join our supportive TOEFL community. By the way, if you're currently preparing for the test and struggling with the writing section, get the Pro package and schedule a consultation with me. I'll analyze your essays and pinpoint exactly what you need to do differently to achieve a higher score. Now, one more word you'll most likely need for TOEFL essays is factor. A factor is something that influences or contributes to a result. It's a great word for essays discussing causes or decisions. Some examples here are: one important factor to consider when choosing a career is job satisfaction. Climate change is a significant factor driving the increase in extreme weather events. As you can see, I've just used our first word, significant, in this sentence. Other useful collocations with this word include key factors, contributing factors, determining factors. The determining factor in the success of the project was effective leadership. 8. Perspective. This word is helpful when talking about opinions, points of view, or ways of thinking. I love using this word in essays because it shows that you're considering ideas from different angles. Example: from an environmental perspective, electric cars are a better alternative to traditional vehicles. Let's look at some more examples. Traveling abroad helps students broaden their perspective on cultural diversity. This means that they learn more about cultural diversity. Volunteering allows individuals to gain a new perspective on social issues. This means they gain a new understanding of social issues. There has been a shift in perspective regarding the importance of mental health. This means people's perspective on mental health has changed. Last on our list is the suffix wise. Adding the suffix wise to a noun, for example, career-wise, education-wise, personality-wise, or family-wise, helps you focus on a specific area. It means with respect to or concerning something. Examples: education-wise, the country has made significant progress in increasing literacy rates. It means with respect to education. Career-wise, gaining international experience can open doors for better opportunities. In this sentence, career-wise means in terms of a career. It's a concise way to specify that the statement is related to career development. As you can see, this construction will not only make your essay sound more professional, but will also allow you present the same information in a shorter and more concise way, something crucial for the TOEFL test. These were the 9 words you might use all the time in TOEFL writing. As you can see, these words are universal because they're broad enough to fit almost any TOEFL topic. They also sound formal and appropriate for academic writing, which will help boost your score. Practice using these words and phrases in essays to make your writing more polished and professional. To get a high score on the TOEFL writing section, your vocabulary should be well developed. At the same time, if you use too many advanced words and phrases that you aren't sure about, your essays might end up sounding unnatural and you could lose points. So what should you do if your level isn't very high, but you need to achieve a high score? Find the best of both worlds. Organize your essays in a simple way to avoid mistakes, but sprinkle them with 4 to 5 advanced expressions that you're 100% confident about. Also, avoid learning single words and focus on phrases instead. They're much easier to use and you'll have fewer chances of making mistakes with them. If you're looking for templates to help you score 26+ on the TOEFL, you can find them in our TOEFL course by clicking the link below. In today's lesson, we'll talk about 11 phrases like that. They're all high level, but at the same time, very versatile, so you can use them in most of your essays. They're part of a list that I usually share with students in my Zoom lessons, and so far, all of them have helped improve their writing and achieve higher scores. Don't forget to keep track of how many words you know. Create 2 columns, write the words you know in one column and the ones you don't know in the other. Then share how many words you know in the comments below. Let's dive in. The first phrase on our agenda is to tackle the problem of. I love it because it's universal and can be used in almost any essay. It means to address or solve a specific issue effectively. You can use it at the beginning of a sentence. to tackle the problem of unemployment, governments should focus on vocational training programs. Or at the end, investing in renewable energy can help tackle the problem of climate change. The second phrase on our list is to play a pivotal role in. It means to have a very important or central part in something. This phrase is useful when explaining why something is essential. So the next time you want to mention that something is extremely important in a process, you can say that it plays a pivotal role in it. For example, education plays a pivotal role in reducing poverty. Technology will play a pivotal role in shaping our future. Phrase number 3 is to shed light on. We often use it to explain or clarify something, especially when discussing complex topics. If you want to provide information about something or make it easier to understand, you shed light on it, just as a streak of light makes things visible in the dark. Some examples. Recent research sheds light on the causes of global warming. The report sheds light on the challenges faced by small businesses. 4. To a significant extent. Use this phrase when describing the degree or the amount of something. It's a formal way to say a lot or very much. For example, technology has, to a significant extent, improved healthcare. Cultural differences influence behavior to a significant extent. 5. To pave the way for. Again, this is one of my favorite phrases because it can be used when talking about progress, technology, infrastructure, or any other developments. If something paves the way for something else, it makes the thing possible. Think of a paved road leading to a goal to help you remember this phrase. For example, innovations in science can pave the way for new medical treatments. So new medical treatments will become possible because of scientific innovations. Or improving infrastructure will pave the way for economic growth. One important thing to remember is that you shouldn't overload your essays with these phrases. Use only the ones that are relevant to your essay to ensure it sounds natural and helps you achieve a high score. Another key aspect is having a clear structure. Just recently, during a TOEFL consultation, I reviewed an essay written by a student with a very good level of English. The essay was almost error-free and well-written, but the overall score was still about 21 or 22. Why? Because the organization of the writing for an academic discussion task was a complete mess. Here's what went wrong. The student presented one reason, but didn't develop it. Then he gave another reason, again without any explanation. After that, he mentioned the opposing opinion in just one sentence and quickly moved on to discussing one student's perspective. If you structure your essay like this, you'll never score higher than 22, no matter how strong your English skills are. So if you're unsure how to properly structure your essays, click the link below to join our TOEFL course. It's especially helpful for those struggling to reach their target score or aiming to achieve their desired score on the first attempt. Now, the 6th phrase is to bring about significant changes in something. You can use it to talk about making major changes or reforms to an existing system, organization, or process. For example, the internet has brought about significant changes in how people communicate. Sustainable practices can bring about significant changes in the environment. 7. To raise concerns about. When people raise concerns about something, it means they're worried about it. The increase in pollution raises concerns about public health. Experts have raised concerns about the impact of social media on teenagers. 8. To be a cornerstone of. Another versatile phrase that can be used in many essays. If something is a cornerstone, it's very important or even foundational to an idea or system. Education is a cornerstone of a successful society. Trust is a cornerstone of healthy relationships. It's the key. The 9th phrase is to be at the forefront of something. We use it to describe something or someone leading or being the most advanced in a field. Some examples are The company is at the forefront of artificial intelligence research. Scientists are at the forefront of the fight against cancer. Now, 10 is to bring attention to. When you bring attention to a certain issue or idea, you highlight or make people notice it. You can use it when discussing problems or the negative effects of certain policies. For example, the documentary brings attention to the effects of deforestation. Activists are working to bring attention to climate change. In your writing for an academic discussion task, you can use this phrase like this: I think it's important to bring attention to ... Now, the last phrase in our list today is to foster an environment of. This means to create or encourage a certain atmosphere or situation. For example, schools should foster an environment of creativity and innovation. A supportive workplace fosters an environment of productivity and collaboration. We are going to discuss 18 essential linking words for acing the TOEFL writing section. If your TOEFL exam is coming up and you need a guide to help you successfully prepare for it, check out our TOEFL prep book. There, you'll learn everything you need to know to succeed on the TOEFL exam, presented in a clear, easy to understand, and fun way. You'll understand the 4 sections of the test, master all the types of questions in the reading section, and learn how to tackle them. Find out how to sharpen your listening skills, ace the writing section, and develop speaking fluency. We've also added an extra chapter to review the necessary grammar and vocabulary that will help you with both the writing and speaking sections, and another with test day tips and strategies. The promo code link is in the description below. Now, what are linking words? These are words or phrases that act as bridges between sentences or paragraphs. For example, and, but, so, unless, even if, and so on. They help connect ideas smoothly and make your writing or speaking easier to understand. As I just mentioned, you don't have to force linking words into your sentences. However, if you do use one, make sure you add the word you know well. And that was just the first example of a perfect linking word for the writing section. So, number 1 is however. It means even so or on the other hand, and is often used to introduce a complication, contrast, or contradiction. You can start a sentence with however, as I did, or you can use it to create compound sentences by connecting 2 contrasting ideas. For example, he studied hard, however, he failed the exam. The movie got rave reviews, however, I found it disappointing. Another example, however, it's important to recognize the challenges associated with integrating technology into education. I love to use this linking word in integrated essays because it's so good and universal and allows you to contrast the reading passage and the lecture. When you include the lecturer's opinion, you can write, the lecturer, however, disagrees and says that. For example, intelligence has nothing to do with star navigation. If I'm writing a post about the negative aspects of smartphones, I might write something like this. In today's fast-paced society, technological advances have revolutionized various aspects of human life, increasing convenience and connectivity. Smartphones, for example, have become ubiquitous tools for communication and access to information. However, while these innovations offer numerous benefits, they also present challenges that society must address. For those who don't know, the word ubiquitous means everywhere. If you see this word for the first time, feel free to check out my video on advanced vocabulary for TOEFL, or download our free PDF with 100 of the most common advanced words you may need for the TOEFL test. The link is in the description. As you can see, the use of however in this paragraph helps to move the discussion from the positive aspects of smartphones to the potential drawbacks, creating a balanced and nuanced argument. You can also see that we use for example in this post. Which brings us to the next two words, for example and for instance. We use these words to give examples. Many students try to replace these linkers with less common alternatives, such as to exemplify, to illustrate, namely, and so on. I wouldn't recommend this. First, you might use them incorrectly and lose points. Second, they're a bit too formal for the kind of writing we do on the TOEFL test. You can start a sentence with for example or for instance, or use them in the middle of a sentence. Many countries have begun to address the problem of pollution. For example, Singapore has implemented strict regulations and promoted public transportation, or many countries have introduced strict regulations to reduce air pollution. For instance, China has imposed limits on industrial emissions and promoted the use of electric vehicles. We can also use the linking words like or such as to give examples. Through platforms like Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, people can keep in touch with friends and family, share updates about their lives, and engage in meaningful conversations. Let's look at another example from one of the integrated essays. Most of these materials, such as building materials, sand, stones, and even construction tools, are not what you would expect from ceremonies. If you want to add information that supports what you've already said, use moreover or in addition. For example, let's say I'm discussing the benefits of technology in education. As I write about it, I can use moreover or in addition to add new points. Online courses and educational platforms give students from all backgrounds access to high-quality learning materials and instruction. In addition, digital resources such as ebooks, educational applications, and online tutorials provide supplemental support for students, allowing them to deepen their understanding of complex concepts at their own pace. Or, in addition, technology has transformed the classroom environment, making learning more interactive and engaging. I could go on and on about the benefits and add, moreover, technology has empowered educators to personalize learning experiences to meet the needs of individual students. Another thing we often need when writing is to show the result or consequence of something. In this case, you can use as a result and therefore. The reason I love them is that they are versatile and can be used in a variety of contexts to show causality or logical consequence. The company implemented cost-cutting measures, and as a result, several employees were laid off. Learning to do household chores prepares young people for their future lives as adults. Therefore, those who were taught to do housework as children will find it easier to transition to independent life when they start living on their own. The next few words are although, while, and even though. These subordinate conjunctions allow us to create complex sentences that are so helpful in the writing section, especially when you need to say a lot of things in a short and concise way. We use these conjunctions to introduce a subordinate clause that contains a statement that contrasts with the main clause statement. My absolute favorite of these three is while, because it's so universal and easy to use in both writing and speaking. Let's look at some examples. An example from an integrated essay. While the reading argues that humpback whales navigate by the stars, the lecturer finds this theory unconvincing. Here, we have while at the beginning of the sentence. We can also put it in the middle of the sentence. The reading argues that humpback whales navigate by the stars, while the lecturer finds this theory unconvincing. A few more examples. Even though she was exhausted, she stayed up late to finish her project. Although he had prepared well for the presentation, he felt nervous when he got up in front of the audience. Although some argue that young people should live with their families as long as possible, I believe that it's more beneficial for them to live independently. The other two linking words we can use to introduce contrasting or opposing ideas are in contrast and on the other hand. I often use them in the integrated essay, where you have to contrast the lecture with the text. You can always write, on the other hand, the lecturer states that, or in contrast, the lecturer's position is that, and give their opinion. Last but not least are the linking words but, so, also, and. Even though you know them well and think they're too basic, I'd say they're the most important linking words out there, so don't forget to use them in your essays. For example, she wanted to travel abroad, but she couldn't afford the plane tickets, so she was forced to stay at home. What we're doing today is a little different from a standard practice test. We'll start with the most essential speaking tips that every high-scoring candidate understands and uses, whether they realize it or not. And then we'll move straight into a full practice test together. And I'll walk you through each response in real time. I'll show you what to say and how to think through your answer from the moment the question appears. By the end of this video, you'll have a clear, repeatable approach that you can bring to every speaking task from this point forward. And if you'd like to get access to high-scoring speaking and writing templates, as well as extra PDFs with sentence structure, punctuation, preposition drills, unlimited practice tests on the TOEFL platform, and a 5% discount on the TOEFL test itself, click the link below. One thing before we begin, please don't skip the tips section. Even if you feel you've heard the speaking advice before, the details we'll cover there are precisely what makes the difference between a 23 and a 27, and they'll make everything in the practice test a lot easier. Let's begin. 10 practical tips to help you nail the TOEFL speaking section. The first tip on our list is understand the structure. The speaking section is already quite intense, so if you want to do well on test day, you need to reduce anything that could make you even more anxious. One of these factors is not being familiar with the structure of the test. The TOEFL speaking section has two parts: listen and repeat and take an interview. In the listen and repeat part, you listen to 7 sentences and repeat each one exactly as you hear it. In the take an interview task, you'll answer 4 questions. You'll have 45 seconds to answer each question. However, when I say that you should understand the structure of the speaking section, I don't just mean learning the basic facts I just told you. You need to go into more detail. For example, you need to know what types of questions appear in the take an interview task and be able to recognize them as soon as you hear them. You also need to know what kind of response you are expected to give for each question type. When I practice this part with my students, we usually drill each question type separately. We study what each question looks like, what subtypes it has, and which templates to use. Then we answer 20 to 30 questions of each type until responding becomes automatic. After that, I usually bombard the student with different questions, and their job is to recognize the question type and respond to it effectively in 45 seconds. This is extremely important because on test day, the questions won't come in a specific order. They might be mixed. That is why you need to be able to tell the different question types apart. Let's see how ready you are for the test. I'll show you a few questions, and your job is to tell me what type of question each one is. Question 1. Most people have different opinions about the role friendship plays in life. Some people believe having many friends is important, while others prefer having only 1 or 2 close friends. How do you personally feel and why? That's a personal choice question. To answer it, you should either choose one point of view and explain it in detail, or say that it depends and discuss both options. Question 2. To begin, I'd like you to think about a recent meaningful interaction you had with a friend. What happened and why did it feel important to you? That's a personal experience question. For these questions, you should share your personal story and structure your response like a pyramid. Introduce the context. For example, when this interaction happened and what kind of friend you were interacting with. Then, Give details. For example, mention what you discussed and why. Finally, give an overview and explain why this interaction was meaningful. Question 3. Now, some people say that friendships formed earlier in life, such as during childhood or school years, tend to be stronger and longer lasting. Do you agree or disagree? Why? This is a general preference question. If you recognize the questions easily, great job. If not, make sure to study them. This will reduce some of your stress and help you speak in a more confident and relaxed way. And as I said earlier, apart from recognizing the question type, you should also know how to start each response. You can use special introductory phrases for this. For each question type, prepare a specific opening sentence, something you'll always use for that type of question. This will give you a little extra time when you're not sure what to say. It will also help you organize your response more effectively and understand which details to include. If you do not have your own introductory phrases yet, you can click the link below to find them, along with PDFs on punctuation for the writing section, sentence structure for a build a sentence task, embedded question, lectures, and more. You also need to know that in the listen and repeat part, it's important to focus on the content words. This will make it easier for you to remember the whole sentence. For example, in the sentence, mobile orders can be placed using your student app. Focus on the words mobile orders, placed, and student app. Details like that are extremely important because if you don't know them, you'll always feel like you're playing roulette where your speaking score depends on pure chance. Instead, you want to make sure you've broken each question in enough detail that you can approach it almost mechanically, like a robot. This way, you'll keep anxiety at bay and increase your chances of scoring high every time. Tip number 2, speak clearly, not quickly. A common problem many students have is that they think they have to speak super fast, with no pauses, not a single one. But that's just not realistic. When people try to do that, they end up making things worse by stressing themselves out even more. They get so focused on speed that they end up pausing or stuttering a lot more than they normally would. I've seen this happen a lot. Many of my students begin by telling me about their situation in fluent and confident English. But when the time comes to answer the first TOEFL question, it's as if I'm listening to someone else. Their responses become weak, they make many mistakes, and some may not even finish their thoughts. It's all because of stress, even in your native language. When you're under pressure, you'd be surprised at how much harder it is to express yourself. So don't add unnecessary stress by trying to speak fast. Instead, focus on clarity and pacing. Even if you speak more slowly, being understood is the most important thing. The third tip is use transition words. I'm not saying you should start every sentence with a linking word. You also don't need to use overly formal transition words like in addition, hence, or nevertheless. But using smooth transitions such as a result, on top of that, besides, and for example, can really help you structure your speech logically and make it more coherent. Just be sure to practice using these words beforehand so they flow naturally when you speak. What I usually suggest to students is to make a list of a few linking words for each purpose. For example, if you want to add another point, you can say besides, on top of that, also. If you want to show contrast, you can say but, however, still. If you want to show a result, you can say as a result, so, this allowed me to, this is why. Then, whenever you answer a question, look at your notes and choose the phrase that fits your response best. For example, if you have already used on top of that and want to add one more point, use besides instead, so you do not repeat yourself. After answering 10 to 15 questions with these linking words in front of you, you'll remember them more easily and start using them naturally when you speak. I also have a useful video about linking words for the speaking section, so if you haven't watched it yet, feel free to check it out. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel because I'll soon release the second video about TOEFL speaking tips, where I'll go into more detail and focus on each part of the speaking section separately. Tip number 4, practice paraphrasing. To succeed on the TOEFL take an interview task, for example, you'll need to rephrase information from the questions. For example, you can say eliminate instead of discontinue. However, you don't have to change every single word. Just replace some of them. Think of it more as simplifying the information you've read or heard, or saying it in different words. For instance, look at this question. Now, some people say that friendships formed earlier in life, such as during childhood or school years, tend to be stronger and longer lasting. Do you agree or disagree? Why? You can say, I agree that the friends you make when you are young are usually more genuine and closer to you. I didn't change all the words, and I didn't try to come up with synonyms for every single word in the question. Instead, I tried to say the same thing in a different, even simpler way. Friendships make friends. Formed earlier in life, when you're young. Stronger and longer lasting. Genuine and close. A good exercise I love to do with students is to give them sample responses to paraphrase. Their job is to look at the text and read it out loud, but change at least 60% of the written text. The important part is to make sure their response is still clear and easy to understand. If you just replace every single word with a synonym, you'll end up with an answer that doesn't make any sense and sounds weird. Tip number 5 is avoid repeating the same words too often in your response. While it's totally okay to repeat a few words twice, make sure you don't use them in back-to-back sentences. For example, if you say, I like jogging in one sentence, don't say I like again in the next sentence. Instead, think of an alternative. For example, I'm a big fan of, I enjoy, I love, I'm particularly interested in, I'm passionate about. It might seem obvious, and you might be thinking, of course, I'll never have this problem. It's so basic. I know all these synonyms and I'll use them instead. However, from what I see in my one-on-one sessions, 99% of students, even students with a very advanced level, make this mistake. Why? Because when you need to speak without any preparation on a challenging topic, your mind gets blocked. And all the good words you know and use when you have time to think simply evaporate from your head. As a result, you go back to your defaults, the words you know 100%, and the words that are already part of your active vocabulary. These are usually, I like, it's interesting, it's good, and it's bad. There is nothing wrong with that. We use these words all the time in everyday speech. Native speakers use them all the time too. But when we take a language test, we need to demonstrate more variety than that. So here's my suggestion. Make a list of the words you repeat most often. You can record a few responses and ask ChatGPT to listen to them if you don't want to do that yourself. Then come up with 2 to 3 alternatives for each option and use them every single time you want to say the simpler version. I usually make my students do that at the beginning by constantly correcting them. For example, if a person says, I like tennis, I would say, I enjoy tennis, or I'm a big fan of tennis. Or if they say, the trip was very interesting, I would suggest, the trip was incredibly engaging. Then these phrases will start coming out naturally simply because they will become part of your active vocabulary, and you will use them as easily as their simpler alternatives. Let's do a small practice. Write down in the comments as many synonyms or paraphrases as you can for these words and phrases. Good, bad, interesting, very, I don't like, thing. These are the words I hear most often in students' responses. So let's see how developed your vocabulary is. Tip number 6 is work on pronunciation. You don't need a perfect accent, but clear pronunciation is essential. Work on tricky words and sounds that you find difficult. You can also practice on the daily dictation website. If you choose the TOEFL listening section there, you'll see many conversations and lectures where you can listen and repeat after the speaker. The vocabulary used in these recordings is very similar to the vocabulary you'll hear and use on the TOEFL speaking test. So try mimicking the speaker's pronunciation and intonation, and you'll soon see huge improvements. You can also practice on the Lingua TOEFL platform. There, you'll also get access to full practice tests and separate drills for each section of the test. Some of the tasks are even a bit harder than what you can expect on test day, so you'll be as prepared as possible. Tip number 7 is answer questions directly. This tip is for the take an interview task. Many students start to go off topic and waste time. Instead, you need to answer the prompt question directly and stay on point throughout your response. From my teaching experience, a good introduction can make or break your whole response, so pay close attention to it. This is where TOEFL speaking templates come in handy. If you have a set phrase that you use to start each answer, you'll save time and find it easier to elaborate on your points. This can help you get a higher score. As I said earlier, you can find high-scoring speaking and writing templates in our TOEFL course, or you can create your own. Try to drill them first. Read each template out loud at least 4 to 5 times to make sure you don't stumble. Then start practicing. Answer question after question using the template until it becomes natural and easy. This way, no matter what you're asked on test day, you'll feel confident and be able to give effective answers. Tip number 8 is create extremely long sentences daily. This is one of my favorite TOEFL speaking exercises these days. My students definitely know this activity because I ask them to make sentences like this all the time. Why do you need these sentences? As I just said, the biggest challenge in TOEFL speaking is that you don't have enough time to include all the details. Therefore, you should use longer sentences that allow you to present many details quickly. This is where words like which, and, so, and as a result, when, even though, while, if, and others will help out. To practice this, try to create long sentences on a daily basis. For example, take any sentence starter. Let's say, when I graduated from college. Then start speaking. Try to say as much as you can in one sentence without breaking it. You're free to say whatever comes to mind. The main goal is to keep it all in one sentence. You could say, when I graduated from college, I started applying for jobs, which took longer than I expected. And I felt discouraged at times, so I decided to take some online courses to improve my skills. And as a result, I became more confident in interviews, which helped me secure a job offer. And when I finally got the job, I realized how important it is to stay persistent, even when things don't go as planned right away, and so on. You get the idea. So if you have a few minutes to spare, create 2 to 3 sentences like this and see how long you can go. You can also keep up the challenge by making each sentence longer than the previous one. Tip number 9 is read out loud daily. Reading aloud helps reduce pauses and hesitations in your speech. Simply read out loud for 2 to 3 minutes every day. Try to avoid pauses, use proper intonation, and sound as clear as possible. It seems simple, but I'm sure you'll have a hard time avoiding hesitations and pauses at first. As you continue to work on this skill, your reading will become much more fluent, and so will your speaking. Most of my students notice results within a few days, so let me know how this exercise works for you. And finally, tip number 10 is learn to recover from mistakes. As you've probably figured out, a big part of your success, about 40 to 50%, comes from staying focused and managing stress. If you stumble, freeze, or make a mistake, quickly correct yourself and move on. Graders value recovery more than perfection. If you start beating yourself up over a mistake, you'll only make more mistakes and damage your score. So no matter what, don't stop halfway through your answer, even if you've paused or made mistakes along the way. Trust me, you'll be glad you mastered the skill when test day comes. In this video, we're going to do a full TOEFL speaking 2026 simulation so you can practice and improve your speaking performance. By the end of this video, you'll feel more confident, more prepared, and you'll know exactly what to do on test day. If you're new to the channel, I have a special playlist called TOEFL Speaking Simulations 2026, where I upload full speaking practice tests. Feel free to use them. They're a great way to improve your speaking score. All right, let's get started. We'll begin with part 1, listen and repeat. You will now listen to 7 sentences, where each new sentence is a bit longer than the previous one. Your job is to repeat exactly what you hear, trying to imitate the intonation and pronunciation. You will have 10 seconds to respond. After each sentence, you'll see the correct response so that you can check yourself. Just so you know, you won't have this on test day, but I usually include this feature to make practice easier. Welcome to the briefing for the laboratory excursion. We have several experiments planned for today. You will find microscopes, test tubes, and glassware on the left side of the room. Chemical samples and measuring tools are further down the table. Please do not bring food or drinks inside and do not touch the chemicals. If you have any questions, please follow the provided guidance and safety instructions. For more details, speak with the lab assistant near the entrance. Now, let's read the same sentences again, but a bit more slowly. You will also see the sentences as you listen to help you notice how some words are pronounced. Let's listen and repeat. Welcome to the briefing for the laboratory excursion. We have several experiments planned for today. You will find microscopes, test tubes, and glassware on the left side of the room. Chemical samples and measuring tools are further down the table. Please do not bring food or drinks inside and do not touch the chemicals. If you have any questions, please follow the provided guidance and safety instructions. For more details, speak with the lab assistant near the entrance. From time to time, I get comments saying that the tasks in my practice tests are quite difficult and that the ETS practice tests are much easier. And yes, you're right. The ETS practice tests are easier, but unfortunately the test is harder. Let me give you an example. Just a few days ago, I got a message from one of my students describing the kind of questions she had in the listen and repeat task. She said that she had to act as a cafe manager, giving instructions to a new barista. This meant she had to repeat sentences with specialized vocabulary such as latte art, saucer, and milk frother, which is not easy even if you understand everything. So whenever you prepare for the speaking section, make sure you use challenging practice materials. This way, you'll always be prepared and will be able to handle the test with confidence. And let me know if you want me to create another speaking simulation with a topic similar to the one my student got. Now, let's look at a few terms you might not have known from this task. They are briefing, glassware, chemical samples, guidance, and lab assistant. A briefing is a short explanation or a set of instructions you receive before starting an activity. It helps you to understand what you're going to do and what rules you need to follow. When a lawyer appears before a court, they bring a brief, which is a detailed explanation of their case, even though the word brief sounds like it should be short. This brief works as a kind of briefing for the judge. In general, whenever you give someone clear instructions or explain something in advance, it's called a briefing. For example, the White House press corps meets in the briefing room to get information about the president's day. Glassware looks like this. It refers to any equipment made of glass, especially in a laboratory. Chemical samples are small amounts of substances used for testing or experiments. They are usually prepared in controlled quantities so that the experiments remain safe and manageable. Guidance means help, support, or advice you give to someone while they're doing something. For example, if you are a TOEFL student, you may need guidance on how to prepare for the test in the fastest and most effective way. If you study chess, you might need guidance on how to outsmart your opponent. A lab assistant is a person who helps in the laboratory. They usually prepare materials, support experiments, and answer questions when needed. So if you have a question during an experiment, you can ask a lab assistant for help. Good. If you struggle with this part of the test, make sure to subscribe to our channel. I'll be releasing more videos soon with tips on each part of the speaking section. If you don't want to wait or you're in a hurry, you can join our TOEFL prep course where I explain all the key strategies in detail, along with useful websites where you can practice. You'll also get access to a platform with free practice tasks, so you'll have both theory and unlimited practice in one place. Plus, as official ETS partners, we offer a 5% discount on your test. The link is below. Now, let's move on to part 2. Take an interview. In this section of the test, you'll listen to 4 questions and answer each one in 45 seconds. This part is divided into 2 blocks. Personal, questions 1 and 2. And general, questions 3 and 4. The first question is usually the personal experience question. It asks about you and your personal experience, either in the past or present. It's not the official ETS term, but I usually call it a personal experience question to make it easier to remember. The second question is the personal choice question, where you usually choose between 2 options and explain your preference. However, you don't always have to choose just one. You can talk about both options using what I call the "it depends" strategy. I highly recommend this approach, by the way, for students who find it difficult to come up with enough ideas or personal examples. Question 3 is more general. It may ask you to choose between 2 broader ideas. For example, it may ask you which option is more beneficial and why. It can also ask you to agree or disagree with a statement. Think of it as a general preference question. Question 4 is either a good idea question, where you're asked if something is a good idea, or an advantage and disadvantage question, where you need to discuss both a benefit and a drawback. This is usually the most challenging part because you have to include both sides within 45 seconds, so I strongly suggest using templates to save time. So, The typical structure of the taken interview part is personal experience, personal choice, general preference, good idea, or advantage, disadvantage. Again, I came up with all of these question names myself, so they aren't official. ETS usually refers to them as questions 1, 2, 3, and 4. But I think naming them this way will help you understand the structure of the speaking section better and know what to expect from each question. This can also help you improve your speaking score. All right, let's give it a try. Question 1, personal experience. Thanks for taking part in today's discussion. To start, can you tell me about a situation when you had to manage your time effectively? What was the situation, and how did you handle it? Well, I'd like to tell you about a time when I was preparing for a final exam. It was back in my sophomore year of college, and the course was an elective. I remember I was already quite busy with my core classes that semester, and since I wasn't always a very diligent student, I ended up preparing at the last minute. I only had a few days to review all the material from the entire term, which was quite a lot, so I tried to make the most of my time. I divided the course into blocks and spent a couple of hours on each one going over the details and key concepts. I also took short 15-minute breaks to stretch and do squats so I could stay focused. As a result, my efforts paid off and I aced the exam. Question 2, personal choice. That's a great example. Now, some people prefer planning their day in advance, while others like to decide things as they go. Which approach do you prefer and why? Well, that's a good question. I personally prefer making decisions on the spot for several reasons. First, I'm not the type of person who enjoys planning things days or weeks in advance. I find it quite boring since I'm a big fan of spontaneous trips or changes in schedule. Also, I think plans can easily fall apart or change unexpectedly, which is why making last-minute decisions allows you to adapt more easily to new situations. For example, if you plan a vacation 6 months in advance and then you get sick, you'll have to reschedule everything, which can cost you both time and money. And of course, for me personally, deciding last minute is much more fun because it makes your life feel more exciting and unpredictable. Question 3. General preference. I see. Now, some people believe that technology helps people be more productive, while others think it mainly creates distractions. Which do you think is more true and why? Honestly, I have mixed feelings about that. On the one hand, using technology can definitely make people more productive and help them work faster. For example, for my one-on-one sessions, I use Calendly, which saves me a lot of time. Instead of going back and forth with students trying to arrange a time, I just send them a link and they can book a slot that works for them in their own time zone. At the same time, I do agree that technology can be quite distracting. Even if you take ChatGPT as an example, sometimes it takes longer to explain what you need than to just do the task yourself. In some cases, the results may not be as strong as what you could produce on your own. So overall, I'd say technology is more helpful than distracting as long as you use it in a smart way. As you can see, you can always talk about both options if you feel that you don't want to give either a long personal example or several reasons from one point of view. Question 4. Advantage, disadvantage. Interesting. One last question is, do you think working or studying from home is a good idea? What is one advantage and one disadvantage of this trend? Well, one major advantage of working or studying from home is that you can save time on your daily commute. For example, if your commute takes about 1 to 2 hours a day, you can use that time for work or studying, which can be very beneficial for your progress and help you improve faster. However, a possible drawback is that you may not be able to interact with many people face-to-face. When you work in an office or attend school or college, you naturally meet new people, make friends, and communicate regularly. If you choose to work or study remotely, you might miss out on that, which can feel a bit isolating at times. In each response, remember to answer the question directly. Move from a general idea to specific details. Give at least one reason or example. Speak clearly and confidently. Use natural pauses and intonation. Thank you so much for watching until the very end. I hope you feel much more prepared for the test now. If you want to prepare in the easiest and most efficient way, get free access to our practice platform and receive AI evaluations of your writing and speaking responses, click the link below to join our TOEFL Academy. Since we're official TOEFL partners, you'll also receive a 5% discount on the test itself. I wish you all a stellar TOEFL score. See you in the next episode. Bye-bye.